and lots of you guys like this joy in truth or this interest in truth, you know. It's like, yeah. When I first met Jesus, I had to go through certain emotions that, because a lot of times when you guys come, I feel like everyone's like, oh, just keep your head down. Don't want to hear anything, you know. And then when we do point something out, there's often a feeling like, oh, now I'm in trouble, and oh, how embarrassing, or just no, that's not right, and when I first met Jesus, I had to go through this period of just like letting those feelings out, where I associated truth with shame or a lack of worth or being in trouble, or, you know, I was so defensive. Oh my gosh, I put you guys to shame really when we met. You know, I wanted to defend.
I don't put them to shame. I think
probably more aware of my own sin in that regard, but yeah, I had to go through a certain pain in that, you know, and that helped me open up to more and more truth, you know, and to also receive, to be able to now I can hear something and I'm going straight to what the issue's about, rather than the, oh gosh, oh, I'm such a terrible person, I can't believe that, you know, I kind of,
or the fight.
or the, no, you know, it used to be, no, that's not true, and then I'd revert to, oh my God, I'm so bad, or, you know, and all of those things are just all the emotions around truth that I kind of had to let go of, and now.
But most of the guys here don't even have the fight. They're not even at that stage yet.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's just
you've got to sort of go through. You got to recognise you're in the fight. But most people don't even do that. They just go. It's sort of like you have this internal thing that says, anything I don't want to hear, I just act like I didn't hear it.
Yes, you
know what I mean?
Like that.
And a lot of you are like that still, where you just act like you didn't even hear it.
Oh,
because internally you don't believe what's being said to you, and you don't want to have a fight with the person or a disagreement. So what you do is you just go, oh, that never happened.
Yes, that's so true.
So that's the first stage you've got to get over. And then once you get over that stage, then you go into the fight stage. And the fight stage is where you feel like justified about, no, what you're saying is actually wrong. You know, like that kind of stage. Yeah.
And then I had a whole stage of just like, oh, that's it. I'm just a terrible person forever.
So I give up.
Evil. Yeah, I give up. It's just wrong, and it's just angry. Yeah.
Sort of like
the limp.
Yeah, it's like a child going.
It's like Elias. Yeah, whatever, Mary. You can restrain me as long as you want. But yes, I'm bad. Okay.
Just leave me alone.
Yeah. And shame. I had a lot of shame too.
They're really the same as the stages of grief, really, in a way.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. And then you get to sort of more of a softer feeling about the whole process. Yeah. And acceptance. Because there's still things that feel challenging to hear or uncomfortable or like, oh, but there's an appreciation for that as well, you know, as it's happening, of like, oh, okay, this is something that I can work with. I'm going to become happier. And a lot of you guys, it's sort of, you do this funny thing, which is kind of like Elias in some ways, where you're just like, oh, thanks for that. Oh, did I? Oh, okay. Oh, no. You know, but it's all just like, nothing is hitting, you know.
It's disconcerting sometimes.
It is, I find it a little...
It's almost worse than that, ignoring it completely.
Yes. I feel kind of... Woo, where are we in? What's that show where the Stepford wife? Everyone's like, yes. There's nothing real happening behind. And sometimes when people get really like, I think, oh, okay, well, at least we're hitting something now. Yeah.
But it is fundamentally exactly the same as the stages of grief that a person goes through when somebody dies, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because really a part of you is dying.
Yeah, like giving up our facade, like the perception I had of myself. I had to go through a whole process of breaking that down and that felt so uncomfortable, and it also felt like I wasn't really getting to any like relieving emotion yet. It was just like, oh, every day is like a challenge to my perception of myself. But at the end of it, it's really good. You get to, well, here it is. Here it all is. And I'm not always trying to fight with the definition of myself that I think I should be. I just am how I am now.
So fundamentally, it starts from the refusal to be humble to emotion.
What helped you get through that, Mary?
That whole process. Jesus. No. Staying engaged. Every time I ran away, nothing happened. It all shut down. I was just miserable. Because also, once you start to get your facade challenged and you kind of like truth in your soul, then you can't really let it go, and it's just like, I can't go back and I don't want to go forward. But just staying engaged with someone who wanted to give me truth just helped me immensely. And having my feelings.
And learning how to be humble.
And even if, I had a lot of problems. I was very, very angry, but a lot of problems acknowledging that, and feeling that humbly. And that really helped me every time I went and did that, even just felt my anger or felt I can't do it, or I felt, I'm scared, or I feel like I'm letting go of something that's really precious, that I wanted to believe about myself. Yeah.
But fundamentally, you've got to discover for yourself why you want to resist truth. Everybody's got their personal reasons, and you've got to discover that for yourself, really, in the end. Somebody can present truth to you, but it is exhausting presenting truth to a person who doesn't want to know it. So at the end of the day, requiring somebody to do that for you is actually an unloving thing in itself. It's exhausting presenting truth to a person who doesn't want to hear any. That's why God never does it.
It's a waste of energy.
It's a waste of God's energy. God doesn't even bother doing it. All God does is let the law do its work until such a time as you really want to know it.
And in mediumship group, we've had that really interesting example lately as well, when spirits come who really want help, who are really asking for truth, compared to spirits who come who are just a bit cranky, and they want to engage a conversation, and there's an opportunity to give truth, but always the outcome is less impactful for the spirit, because that desire isn't there yet.
They're not ready to change.
Yeah.
Conversations with people that are not ready to change are basically not worth having, really. And you're personally responsible for getting yourself into a stage of wanting truth. God makes you personally responsible for it, and the law will help. The pain and suffering experience because you're breaking the law helps, but I've seen people fight the law for centuries. So it does boil down to just getting into a new state yourself and desiring that state. And that requires a lot of sincerity on the individual's part. So
when I said how I got through it, and I was joking when I said Jesus, it's kind of like I had to do that for myself, but I really acknowledged the generosity of Jesus in that process with me.
But I wouldn't do it again. In my current state.
And I can see how I really kind of abused the situation, because he was willing to keep presenting things to me even when I was fighting them, and that I see now as a very big gift. I wanted that. I kind of demanded that, which is why sometimes I call you guys on it, because I can see the error of my ways. But the fact that he was still giving enough to do that it's a gift. Like I said in mediumship last week when there was someone who was resistive. Last week. Well, it's a choice now. We don't have to talk to this spirit. It's a choice whether or not we do. And that's what I acknowledge in Jay, is that he made that choice to give it to me, and ultimately I benefited.
And not always too. I had some meditations of my own of, you know, being hopeful. Like I've always had quite a strong error of being hopeful about people wanting to improve.
Yes.
And a lot of that is to avoid your own personal pain about people around you not wanting to grow. So you keep presenting something because you hope that the person will be more loving, but that's really because you don't want to face that they're not being loving. Does that make sense? And once you give that up emotionally, then after that you're far less willing to do what I was doing. So you've got to learn to face the reality of things. And a lot of the ways that I used to avoid my own emotions was to not face the reality of the situation around me. And so, because a lot of times people would be very unloving, and I'd always be hopeful that they would actually have some realizations and change, when reality was saying, look, they have no intention of changing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So now I'm more focused on, if a person has an intention to change, then of course I will engage and give as much of my time as I can. But if I feel from a person there's no intention to change, then I don't want to give any of my time anymore.
And I actually feel like that's more beneficial on the receiving end, even, because it definitely leaves you more with, well, I've got to make
Obviously,
a
I don't
choice.
want to change,
I'm not.
Yeah, well, if you're sincere, it leaves you with that. If you're insincere, you end up leaving with a lot of rage. So a lot of people I talk with now, come to me thinking they're sincere. I tell them they're not, and I don't want to engage with them anymore. And then they leave and they go into these rages and start abusing me to other people and stuff like that. Not understanding that I'm giving my time as a gift anyway. The fact that they're even there in the first place was a gift. But now I'm far less willing to just say the same things over and over again, in hoping that there's a different outcome, that a person realises something. Yeah, each person is. I suppose one of the reasons too I used to do it was because I felt sort of responsible for everybody. I realise that most people don't know truth, and when you know the truth, the error can be sometimes that you feel responsible for other people not knowing it, and you're not actually responsible for that. So one of the things that I've been working through a lot is about not feeling responsible for the fact that people don't know the truth. Even though I know it.
Is that what the kind of ethos of Jehovah's Witnesses, that they had this desperation for everyone else to find the truth?
Yeah, I suppose you could say that. A lot of preaching type of, there's a lot of religions that are preachy, and one of them is the Jehovah's Witness faith, another one's the Mormon faith. And there's a general feeling in those faiths that they're responsible to share truth with people in the world who don't know it, even if those people are not asking for it. And obviously it's driven by personal, emotional reasons, not because the reality is God doesn't share truth with you unless you want it. Other than that, God just relies on the law He's created to deliver the truth to you through pain and suffering, or through positive outcomes. That's how. If you look at the law, the way God's constructed every law, there's compensation, you could say, that is positive in the sense, it's all positive, but there's what you call positive feedback coming from the law, which is telling you you did a good thing. And then there's negative feedback coming from the law, which is telling you you did a bad thing. Both things are very good that they happen because, one way or the other, you're going to learn you did the wrong thing. And also what the right thing is as well, which is an essential part of conversation, is learning what is right, not just learning what is wrong. And so God basically constructed the laws, and God relies on those laws, and they work with mathematical precision, and those laws correct a person's behaviour whether they want the truth or not, is the net result of those things. Whereas when you enter a personal relationship with God, now you have to want the truth. That's a different state than, not caring whether you have it or not. Yeah. Once you want it, now your heart's more open because you're expressing a desire for it. Your heart's open, so it can't be an intellectual state, it's got to be an emotional one, where your heart wants the truth now about matters. Now God has lots of other opportunities to share the truth with you besides the law. He can encourage some spirits to come and talk to you. He can encourage a person on earth to come and talk to you and share it with you. And God himself can share it with you through your conscience. And of course, unless your heart is open, the conscience won't work. So this is why most people on earth can't hear God sharing truth with them, because the conscience isn't working.
So beautiful that, isn't it? That when you want it, it's so generous.
But it has to be God's measurement of your sincerity. It's not your measurement of your sincerity. You know what I mean?
You notice that,
Yeah. It's like, quite often we think we're being sincere when we're not. And, God will always provide the truth when you are sincere, but it is God's measurement of whether you're sincere or not your own. Yeah.
There's a beautiful example in the Robert James Lee's books when can't remember the name, he loses his last matchbox, or loses his
little boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's influence for, they send out to different people and then they wait. I thought that was...
Yeah.
We were talking yesterday about like when you sincerely long for help from a loving person, that it always comes. Like even I was talking to the guys about how a lot of times by the time we're 7 or 8, we're so disillusioned with everything, we don't actually ask for help for anything ever. And we have no faith that help will come or that a loving person is there. But I was saying, like, it's like a law of the universe that if you really want help on an issue, sincerely, it will come. That God created it that way. It might not come in human form, but often, humans are influenced to help. Yeah. It's really beautiful.
You don't get it unless you get it.
And it's really just our anger, isn't it? That stands in the way of that. Like, for me, I just keep waking up to the fact that I'm still in a tantrum. I still want something else.
I don't think it's just as simple as anger, though. It's, the reasons for our anger are very complicated, and it does require a lot of humility to find them.
Yeah, but it's still the cause of it. The result of it is still a layer of anger, isn't it?
But the anger is an effect.
Yeah.
It's not a cause. The anger is the effect of you wanting power over something that you feel is too hard, or you feel justified as too hard to feel, too bad to feel. So a lot of anger comes from a lack of faith, actually. So if you deal with your lack of faith, a lot of times your anger will dissipate. And so anger is not necessarily an emotion you have to feel. You need to be conscious of the fact that you're feeling it, but it actually comes from other feelings, usually associated with humility or faith, that cause you to be in a rage. And rage is about wanting power over, or wanting to hold on to your lack of faith, or wanting power over your hard emotions. So a person who stays in anger is, and then goes, well, all I got to do is release that anger. If you don't understand what is the cause of your anger, it's very, very hard to release the desire for it. Does that make sense?
Isn't the anger, from my experience, the anger is, I'm trying to avoid the cause of the anger in the anger. And so
Correct.
unless I go into my anger with kind of a seeking,
you've got to go into it with a seeking attitude to get below it, not just to have it. You can stay in rages for centuries. You got to have a desire to get below it, and below it is faith issues or humility issues, and even humility issues are frequently faith issues. So an issue of humility is I don't have any faith that if I cry it'll fix.
Faith in the truth.
No faith in in emotion and God, no faith in God's way. So substantially our problems, even our rage, begins with our lack of faith. And unless you're prepared to examine the causes of your lack of faith, the reasons why you have no faith, it's unlikely you'll get out of anger. So a lot of people have anger for long periods of time, and in the spirit world it's often to the point where they just have anger. The more anger they have, the more their condition degrades. And they get to a point where they're so exhausted by their anger, they can't be angry anymore because they're just exhausted. But then they've got exhaustion to feel. So you can still stay in that state for another few hundred years if you want to.
Whereas a bit of faith would pull you out much earlier.
Correct. Yeah, a bit of faith would pull you out much earlier.
grieving your lack of faith would get you out.
Well, you've got to grieve the opposite. So you've got to let go of the reason why you are so firm. You could say you have faith, but you have faith in the lie. So what you've got to do is give up the lie by giving up your faith in it. And giving up your faith in a lie is an emotional process. So that requires humility, which means feeling your emotions. But so unless you give up your faith in the lie, you will never be able to hear a truth. And when I say hear, I don't mean just with the ears. I mean actually hear it and do something about it. So, and that requires a very sincere process of engagement. And the more you engage and the more constancy is in your engagement, the more likely you are to have a breakthrough. It's a bit like reading Mother and Millions, right?
Yes.
In the sense that if you do it once a month, you're not going to get an outcome because it grows faster than you can remove it. But if you're constant on a daily basis in removing it and then checking on it, you can see that you can now pretty much eradicate it and keep it under that control. So a lot of issues in life are about how constant you are, how regular you are, how consistent you are at doing something, and
that's the sincerity, isn't it?
Yeah, and your sincerity drives your consistency. Yeah. So if you deal with things once now and then 6 months later you deal with it again, well, obviously that's not very consistent, and it's highly unlikely that you're going to have any resolution using those methods. And also the lack of consistency is a measure of sincerity. So you're actually insincere when you have a lack of consistency. So it's proof or evidence of your insincerity. If a person who's truly sincere is always consistent until the issue is dealt with.
So you're not going to get much help in that situation.
No, that's right. Because unless you're consistent and you're desirous and you are regular in attendance to the issues, that is a part of how you demonstrate your own sincerity in dealing with the issue. And God's laws measure sincerity through hundreds of different mathematical ways, and one of those ways is how consistent a person is, how regular they are, how attentive they are, how desirous they are, and so forth. And you know, your sincerity is being measured by the law, but interestingly enough, God actually also is very open to measuring your sincerity without the law. Mm-hmm. God is because as soon as a person transfers from an insincere state to a sincere state, God's soul responds. So it's not just the law. Yeah. God's soul does not respond until the sincere state is developed, but the law is there to get you to a sincere state. But as soon as you're in a sincere state, not only is the law going to benefit you in that state, because the laws are all measuring sincerity, but now God's soul, you know, God himself is also responding to that state because he wants to. So God now, once you become sincere, God has a personal interest in you now that he didn't have as much before because you were insincere. Does that make sense? So while he's interested in you in terms of caring for you, he's not going to have a lot of interest in helping you until you become sincere. And he actually measures your sincerity. And once you are sincere, he wants to help you. In addition to the law of helping you. You know? Yeah. So...
Seems like a pretty good place.
Yeah.
I realise I'm very sincere in control.
Very sincere in your lack of faith.
Well, my lack of faith.
Or you could say your false faith.
Faith in control.
Yeah, in
in
control. And because I felt so powerless, and then I just looked at the relationships I had. It was all about, not everything, but everyone was about control. Mm. And I thought, okay, I fought my whole life to have control because I had to fight for every single thing. Mm. And I started to look at how much that was in my life. Just everything was about control. Mm. And if I looked at control, it didn't matter what feedback I was getting. It was about, I wanted to be in control, whether I was being bossy, manipulative, everything. And then I started to feel really like I'm only starting to feel how much, because I couldn't work out, do I really fight you, God? And I had that really, somewhere in my sleep, I had that feeling about, I was shooting out everywhere, and I was shooting up as well, and that was God. Mm-hmm. And it was like, don't get near me, that's the isolation. Mm-hmm.
Leave me alone.
Leave me alone, and I'm being, self-protective. Mm-hmm. And this castle of facade that I have, I think it's strong and powerful, but it's like...
That's where the faith is corrupted.
Yeah, it's like so thin, it's like, you could just, if you had any real strength, you just go like that. But I'm like, no, it's my power, I'm going to stay here. And I started to feel how, I actually started to feel what it was like to feel resistive. It was like a real feeling of, I'm not going to go there. And it was like, and then everything started actually, I've got a little quick drawing of it, beginning of it. And God is helping me, and I'm going, no, fuck off, and I look at my beautiful facade, it's wonderful, and it's as ugly as hell, and I'm shooting out cannonballs everywhere, being protective, and I'm right in the middle there. You might not see me amongst all the spirits, and going, I'm safe here.
This is good.
Yeah, this.
Here I am, hunkered down.
Yeah,
thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, that's good self-reflection, isn't it?
Well, I started a little bit to feel what it was like to be, because we always talk about resistive. I go, yeah, I'm resistant to that. But I started to feel, I'm and resistant, yeah. You know, and I thought, fuck, this is awful. But, you know, I was like really feeling it instead of going, oh, yeah, I'm resistant.
Yeah, you got to really feel it.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a part of being humble. Is really feeling the feelings.
yeah,
It's really, not just sort of ignoring them or making out that it's not as bad as what,
yeah,
you know, we frequently try to make out it's not as bad as what it really is.
yeah. And then you really feel it's really, like Mary said,
It's really bad, yeah.
yeah. And then you have to go
And then
down.
you realise that actually,
Yeah.
if everybody in the world has, you can understand why the world's so dark, because everybody in the world has the same emotions I do.
Yeah.
And if my emotions are pretty dark, then it's pretty likely everybody else's is too.
Not me, I think I'm the worst in the world. I'm like, no one's as bad as me. It's so bad. But that's not true either, as I'm coming to learn. Yeah.
I have a question about false beliefs. Identify you have a false belief and you feel the error in it, and at the end of it you sort of get some understanding of why it's there. You've talked before about now replacing that with truth, the truth, God's truth.
Well, like, as we've just been saying, you can't replace it. You've got to let it go first.
Yep.
So, you know, the laws that govern the way your soul works mean that while you have a belief of one kind that is false on one on a certain type of issue, you will never be able to absorb the truth on that same issue while that belief remains inside of you. You're just not ever going to. You can, you know, there's a whole lot of techniques nowadays people use, like, you know, what do they call it, where they, you know, remind themselves every day, affirmational type of techniques, but also they call it neuro-linguistic programming, and there's a lot of new age sort of things that have been, and designed by psychologists frequently, to try to reprogram a person into a different course of action. Cognitive therapy, yeah, all that stuff. None of it works, because unless you let go of the false, you will never be able to absorb the true. And the process of letting go of the false is not an intellectual process. It's an emotional one. So the false faith, you could say the faith that's in error, or what we called in the last assistant group the corrupt faith. And that has to be, you've got to go through an emotional process to let it go. If you don't do that emotional process, you will not let it go. And it doesn't matter how much somebody sits down with you and tries to convince you otherwise, you will not be able to hear it. And you will not be able to work your way through it. And it's an emotional process, whether the law demands the emotion from you or whether you go through the process emotionally through a voluntary effort. So the law of compensation demands this emotional process. That's why everybody who's been through the law of compensation says it's a painful process, because the pain is the emotional pain that they have experiencing the error going away. So it's an emotional process no matter which way you progress. One way you can get God's help, obviously. The other way is that you're by yourself with the law. But either way, you're going to be faced with some emotion. So the sooner you recognise voluntarily going through emotion is better than being forced upon you, the better off your life will be. But on every single issue where you have a false faith, you're not going to be able to get a true faith unless that false faith is released emotionally. Yeah. So.
But that's not something that happens just because you release the false faith.
The true one coming, you mean?
Yeah.
That's right. You've got to also want the true one, don't you?
Yes.
So you can actually go through an emotional process of releasing a false one and actually be left with no faith at all. And obviously that's not advisable, because no faith usually means no desire, and usually means a very passive life. But
so in that place,
in which place?
The place where you're you don't have the true feeling
In your soul, yeah.
God's truth on the matter.
In other words, you don't have true faith about the
True
matter.
faith.
Yeah.
That's also a place where you then develop the desire to know, to pray.
Yeah, and usually even that is linked to false faith that you have. So the whole reason why you don't want the truth is because frequently you believe the truth is harmful. Does that make sense? So if you think about it logically, when you look at a child, like a child of Elias's age or younger, usually younger than him, they generally want truth unless they've been. Elias is quite tainted now with his emotion, right, because of his addictions. But if a child hasn't been, they are very inquisitive all the time. They're always asking questions. They always want to know more truth. They want why this, why that, why this, why that. And by the time they usually get to Elias's age, if they haven't had emotional addictions in play, they will ask why about everything. That's what you will do when you're free of the reasons why you don't want to know why. You understand? So if you're free of the false faith, there is a natural desire to know why about things, the reality of things.
And you just ask.
And you just ask. And also because you haven't got any emotional reasons for not asking, it's a lot easier for you to ask. Does that make sense?
It does. That's kind of the bit that I knew there was a question there, but you've answered it in those last couple of things.
So when you are in a state where you have released the reasons why you don't want to know, there is this natural childlike curiosity that starts developing that you just want to know, and so you ask a lot more questions. You are a lot more open to receiving the answers. You're not locked into ideas or concepts anymore either. So for example, for myself, I don't feel locked into any concept. If somebody presents a truth to me, and I ask until I'm sure, till the truth can be logically presented to me, I'm happy to receive it. I don't feel resisted because of one of my old ideas or something like that. In fact, you get to a stage where you believe your own ideas are really worthless in a lot of ways, and so that's sort of how I feel about myself. I feel most of my own ideas are worthless in comparison to what God's ideas on the matter are. Does that make sense? And so. And I don't mean they're worthless in the sense that it's not worth me having an idea. What I mean is it's worthless if I've got to give it up, then it's of no value. I might as well give it up. There's no good fighting for something that's of no value when you know it's wrong, right? So
You're emotionally invested in.
Yeah, I don't feel emotionally invested in my ideas. So when it comes to teaching you truth, even though I'm firm about what the truth is, I don't feel emotionally invested in not receiving new ideas. Does that make sense? At all, in fact. But those new ideas are going to have to be based on a foundation of the 5 principles in order for me to receive them. Because I know that every truth in the universe is based on the 5 principles. Right? That we've been talking about love, truth, humility, faith, and action. Every fundamental thing you're ever going to learn is going to have those 5 things in it. So if it doesn't have those 5 things in it, I know it's false already. So when I'm hearing a person present to me an idea or a concept, if I can identify that it's missing one of those 5 things, I know immediately it's false. Does that make sense?
All of it?
All of it. Yep. It can't be true because every truth of God has all of the 5 things in it. Do you understand? And so if one of those things is missing and can be proven to be missing, then there is no truth there. It has to have the 5 things in order to be truth. Yeah. And anything not truth is false. So I
guess I'm struggling with that you hear certain things and you can see there's an element of truth in it, but
Yeah, I don't believe that much
Okay.
anymore. Yeah.
okay.
I feel
But
like
give an example, and I'll see what I'll show you why.
Um,
Where you felt there was an element of truth.
what's a recent example?
Hmm.
I don't know, like I have to think of something. I'll come back to because I know it's not there, but sometimes I read, I can't give you a specific example, but sometimes I read, you know, like some news or something and I can see, oh, that seems truthful, but no, they're missing a point there, you know. Regenerative agriculture could be something. They're acknowledging that we've got a problem with carbon, but they want to keep their cows, you know, so there's the acknowledgement that something's wrong, but they don't really want to go about a solution. Yeah.
Yeah, but say, let's look at regenerative agriculture. The whole concept of agriculture itself is
It's flawed.
It's
Yeah,
flawed.
okay.
so.
Yeah.
Putting the word regenerative in front of it, saying it's loving.
It's greenwashing.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
is.
because regenerative really isn't it? It's regenerative so more cows can eat.
Well, it's driven by motivation. Firstly, the motivation is, what do they call it when you're trying to praise yourself?
Virtue signaling.
Virtue signalling. The usage of the word itself is virtue signalling, isn't it? It's really saying, oh, because I'm involved in regenerative agriculture, that means that my agriculture is better than yours.
Yeah.
And you're really
Better
saying
than
now
God's.
that I'm better than you because I do that and you don't. And so a lot of stuff comes from this underlying motivation, which is actually an unloving motivation to make yourself look good rather than
Okay.
face the truth about yourself.
Okay, so
Right.
that what you're saying then is God measures the intention of that, and that's where it's
Correct.
all
So if I'm
100%
presenting the
false.
technique of regenerative agriculture, and the only reason why I'm doing it is to indicate to you that I'm a nice fella and you're not,
or you want to keep eating your meat or whatever
or
it is.
whatever,
Yeah, no. I
then
get
my
it.
motive is completely flawed and I'm being completely unloving, and therefore whatever I'm saying is just a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah, no.
Does that make sense?
No, it does.
It's
It
just
does.
false.
I'm glad I asked.
Because my motive is false, my desire is false, so whatever I'm saying is not even worth listening to, right?
Yeah,
You'd be better off just going and doing something, like just turning off your ears completely and going to do something else rather than listen to me talk about it.
yeah. No, that makes
If my
sense.
motive is like that.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what I say, it's going to be flawed. It's going to have all sorts of tainted ideas and concepts, tainted faith in it, and also there's going to be a lot of things I'm ignoring.
So to sort of flip that over, like if you can sort of, whenever somebody's talking and there's self-motivation, it's like it's that whole thing that you keep saying, check in with the intention, so that if your intention and desire are pure, it will have the quality of all of those 5 things in it.
Always,
Yeah,
always.
that was helpful.
Yeah, always.
And our refusal to see that and want, something in the world to be heading in the right direction, heading the same way we are, all of
It's
that
avoidance
stuff.
of our own grief,
It's
isn't
just,
it? You think about some of the discussion we have, you can come out of the discussion feeling like, oh, the world is in a bad place, and it feels absolutely hopeless, right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's how many of you come out of the conversation. This is why you don't want these conversations. But that's avoidance of your own grief.
Yeah.
If you're avoiding your own grief, you can't be loving. So anything you open your mouth about now is not going to be loving because you're avoiding your own grief. Does that make sense? And so it's so easy to tell when something is out of harmony with God's truth, because if those 5 things are not in it, then it's automatically out of harmony. And this is why sometimes when I'm with people, Mary gets a bit triggered sometimes about it, where after 5 minutes of listening to them, I'm just saying,
No.
you're not sincere, we need to stop the conversation, you need to leave. Because the words coming out of their mouth, when I analyse them through the 5 principles, there's so many flaws in them and there's such a lack of sincerity in the person and their motivation. What can I do? There's nothing I can do, and I'm just wasting my time sitting there, and also wasting theirs.
You're
Because
enabling them.
I'm
aren't you?
enabling them
Yeah.
to think that everything's great when it's actually not. No.
Kind of agreeing with their false premise. That, yeah. That's the question I have sometimes with everybody coming. Like when you guys don't want truth, am I just helping you in a facade of thinking that you do just by you coming, you know? Yeah.
Well, you notice even today I was quiet until one of you asked a question. I don't feel like I need to open my mouth at any time really, unless I feel, there's a sincere desire there, I'll respond to that.
Getting back to the children, you don't see many children who ask a lot of questions.
No,
these
not
days.
nowadays.
It's like something that you saw in kind of movies, even like
Yeah.
and one or two children.
You used to notice it a lot, like 50 years ago or 30 years
I
ago.
remember my parents complaining about the phase where everything was why.
I know. I see it really strongly because people would say because. And I was like, why? Because what?
What? Yeah, that's right.
But I've been saying that to Eliza all morning.
But
You
see,
can
by
ask me
the
a
time
question.
they're at Eliza's
so
age
used to
now,
someone just being there.
they're so steeped in addiction
Yes.
that he's not in a state where he wants to ask questions anymore.
Yeah.
Because the addiction's so too much there now.
He doesn't ask questions when he's in
No.
the addiction. When he's himself,
Then he might.
then he does.
Yeah. But because there's so many addictions at play by the time they're this age, because of the way the parenting has been, there's so many addictions by the time they're this age, they've already been squashed out of the desire to know why about anything. So that natural curiosity, which is actually inbuilt in each soul, actually, it has been suppressed.
And that's how we're naturally meant to learn, right?
Correct.
Without injury, we would just ask
We would
the
ask
question
why about everything.
and we'd get the answer.
Yep. You'd ask why about everything. In the first century, that's what I was like. Why about everything?
And because you're sincere, God's laws just bring it to you.
That's right.
They did a study on abused children and not abused children. And they put a few little objects in front of them. And the abused children, they didn't even pick up
An object.
an object, whereas the
Too
others,
scared to.
who were supposed to be not abused, they at least moved around and played with them.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Most parents have no idea how much damage is done by parenting by the time a child is 1 year old.
I saw a little 4-year-old in the supermarket the other day, and he asked his dad, "What's this, Dad? What's this, Dad?" And Dad ignored every single question, and I was so sad. And I went back and I just pretended to look at the stuff, and he said it, and I said, "You know your numbers." And then we started talking about that through the whole process.
Dad didn't say anything.
Not a word.
Because that's what really being a parent is about, is being a teacher, really, at the end of the day.
Anya, my daughter, she said to me when she's very tiny, and I was looking at some cards in the shop, and she was asking me things, and I ignored her. And the next thing I heard was, "Mummy, mummy, mummy, mummy." She got my attention. I feel like, obviously I was ignoring her, but that was her way of capturing me, was to sing something so that I'd come out of whatever I was, It was quite nice, but it was terrible that, you know how bad you are.
No, we get shut down by saying, speak when you're spoken to. All good things come to those who wait. So you just wait and wait. And
wait and shut up.
Just be quiet, don't go do it,
Yeah. But the parenting nowadays is not like that. It's almost the opposite to that. It's more like, I'm going to give you everything you ever wanted, and whenever you want it, without you having to take any effort whatsoever, and that also does just as much damage, if not more. Because the child, it's a bit harder to identify the abuse in that second situation. And so while many of you were abused the first way, this second way that is happening in today's generation of children is actually going to be much more difficult for those children to deal with.
Is that what they call a helicopter parent? Where they just hover over the child, kind of
Well, they respond to the
every
child's
need.
every whim.
Yeah.
Every emotional addiction,
Well, they get created, don't
which
they?
which the parents created. Yeah.
You can still be a parent of that type without being a helicopter parent. though.
Yeah.
Well,
That's right.
that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it was so interesting for me to have the morning with Elias, just to feel myself and to feel his injury, and then like the anticipation he has that a woman will just give him attention, and all he needs to do is just say something or do. He cycled through different methods.
Fundamentally, if he's with a person and not asking questions,
Yeah,
he's already in an addiction.
yeah,
That's right.
and I kept
He's
reminding
already in
him,
a state.
if you want something, you can.
If you're with a
Ask
person
me.
and not asking questions, you're already in an addiction.
Yeah.
It's the same principle. A person, by nature, we're inquisitive.
Yeah.
God designed the soul to be inquisitive.
So when we're with him then, it's best that we don't even talk until he's asking us?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're supplying the emotion already
Yeah, right.
before you open your mouth. And unless you deal with the emotion, he's not going to be prone to talk.
Yeah.
He's not going to want to ask
Yeah.
because he can feel your addiction with him straight away.
Yeah.
And he's just going to respond in his addiction with you. So he's not going to be prone to talk sincerely until the addiction is broken. And that means your addiction has to be broken. And for most adults, they have less inclination to break their addictions than the children themselves do. And so the children learn, don't,
Just bide my time.
just bide my time, and eventually the adult will
Yeah.
I'll give
respond to
him-
my addiction.
Yeah.
Or if the adult gets to a stage where there's no addiction, then the child will start expressing itself in a pure manner, in an inquisitive manner, without demand, without rage. So that if a child's in a state of rage or demand or quiet and is with you, it's not like when you're sitting next to somebody, is it in your nature to say nothing?
Well,
Of course
some
it
of
isn't,
you.
is it?
Not in your nature.
It's not even in your nature to say
No,
nothing
no.
for all of you, really. You'll finish up saying something to your neighbour sooner or later. Does that make sense? So if a child is quiet like that, then it means there's something
Yes.
going on
Yes.
with an addiction.
Yes.
And also if a child just becomes demanding, angry, and all these other ways a child would be, then he's just responding to your addictions. And unless you deal with your own addictions, he's not going to respond differently. Because he can feel the holes are there and he's not going to respond differently. Unless he's in a state of self-awareness. So in the first century, I was in a state of self-awareness as a child. And so even if a person wanted addictions met, I wouldn't meet them, but I was still inquisitive and I still wanted to know things and all those kind of things. Often got me in trouble. And even in this life, I've been like that a lot. But if you are in a state where you're loving, you will also be in a state where you're inquisitive, where you want to know things. So this is why when I say to many of you, you're not even asking questions when we meet together, this is indicative that you still want your addiction met. Does that make sense? It's an indication that you're in a place of addictions. You're not in a place where you're desirous of truth yet. A person who's in a state of desiring truth always asks questions. So
And sincere questions, not
And sincere.
questions like, "Oh, I'd like to make a point, Jesus. Could you agree with my,
That's right.
my quote
Yeah.
question?" Yeah. Or can you supply me with the answer I
or
want?
can you supply me with a bit of attention?
Yes, that's very
Because that's what I'm missing or something like that.
Like, Jesus and I were talking during the week about how a lot of times I see this a lot because Jesus loves so well. A lot of times people are interacting with him about a subject, but they're not even interested in what he's saying about it. They just enjoy his love for them, you know?
I notice that a lot.
Yeah.
It's like my words are not,
Hitting, yeah.
they're just in one ear out the other, as the saying goes.
I always think of Homer Simpson and his dog. I don't know if anyone watched The Simpsons. I didn't watch much, but I remember this one thing where it's The Simpsons from the dog's viewpoint, and he's just like, it's all in black and white, and he's just wandering around, and then like Homer will talk to him, and he might be going, "Bad dog, you did it," and all he sees is like Homer just, he can't understand the words, but he's just like getting Homer's attention. That's kind of what it's like.
Yeah, it's a when a child doesn't ask questions, it's the same indication when an adult doesn't ask questions. It's the same problem. It means they're not interested. Why wouldn't they be interested in truth? There's got to be an additional reason why you wouldn't be interested in the truth, right? So yeah.
I found this morning the lesser talked about benefit of restraining is because I realised stuff was happening between Elias and I was like, okay, he's not listening to when I'm giving him direction. I need to restrain him. And I just sat there, I was like, yeah, what do I need to sort out here? And it actually changed. It was my restriction. It almost like I was holding him, but I was really kind of restricting myself. And our dynamic changed after that because I kind of was like, oh, yeah, all these things. Yeah. It was very good.
It was interesting, you know, like I was just appreciating how much we learn just by being here and being able to observe, because there was that shift, and then the next thing he's come like, you know, he's in the tantrum instant. I can't remember what set it off. And then the next thing, he's wet his pants, you know. And so, and then he slowly came up to you. And even then, I stopped watching at that point, but the next thing I saw, he was playing happily with some grass or something, and then he just fell asleep.
Yeah, I just said to him, mate, if you need to have a cry, because he was just like sort of sooking at me and not saying anything. I said, if you want to ask me a question, you can ask me a question. If you want to have a cry, you can have a cry. But right now you're trying to manipulate me. And that was it. He just sat down on the grass and started looking at the leaves. Yeah.
So Mary, was that the restriction that you felt because you hadn't said those words to him?
No, it was all about my emotions, Denise. Yeah. It was all about feeling that just different emotions I have with men. And just needing to feel about them more and feeling what I do in order to avoid certain emotions with men. And then I could really feel what was happening between Elias and I. Yeah. And that helped me be more loving towards him. Yeah. Dealing with him actually felt a lot like dealing with Jad and Ulf, actually. This constant demand. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to engage with you, but I want from you. I want from you. I want from you. I want attention. I want attention. I want attention. Yeah. And feeling personally miffed if it's not given, you know, that you've been hurt. And that's how Elias was feeling. And it was a good experience for me to feel about that what I do in response to those projections.
I all the time feel that I want to ask questions, and all the time I also feel that I can't ask questions. I'm stopping myself. I don't understand what's going on.
Well, it means you're frightened of something, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah, so the key is for you to work out what you're frightened about.
I have this.
Can I just say, Anna, you're very worried about the impression you give to others and how others interpret the impression. And so that means you're very worried about the facade you present and making sure that facade is sort of pretty polished and so that has a large effect on a person's open curiosity. It means you can't be curious because you're more worried about what a person's going to feel about you than you are about wanting to know the truth about a thing. Yeah. It's the only times I notice when you ask questions are when you've forgotten yourself.
So lovely.
You sort of forget to put the facade on, and sometimes it happens when you get quite interested in the subject beyond the limit of your facade. So what I mean by that is that your facade says shut up, shut up, shut up, you know, present stoicism or whatever, or present the fact that I know what's going on or all that. But after a while, if a subject's appealing to you, you'll get so enmeshed in the subject that you forget yourself. And then you start asking questions. But that's a pretty rare state. It takes many hours in a conversation before you get to that state, generally. So that's usually indicative of the fact that you believe now that your own facade is more important than knowing the information itself that you're asking about or that you'd like to ask about. Yeah. So some of the people here don't have that injury where they're open to just asking question after question after question. They don't really have that injury where they have other injuries, but not that specific injury of, like, I have to get, with yourself, you have to get so involved in the subject and so interested in the subject before you start asking questions, rather than sort of having a natural interest from the beginning of the subject. Does that make sense?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
I have thought that it has been that I was tired from the morning's work, and I had to have
Physical tiredness doesn't affect your mental acuity. So, in fact, if anything, physical tiredness can enhance your mental acuity. So, it's not about being tired. It's about your emotional shutdown. But when a person is emotionally shutting down, a lot of their emotional effort is being dominated by the mind. It's being dominated by the mind. The mind is trying to control the emotional, and that requires a lot of effort, and it makes people very tired. So yeah, you won't feel tired very much at all unless you're physically exhausted, and intellectually, even when you're physically exhausted, you still can be mentally very sharp. And in fact, if you have not shut down an emotion, you will always be mentally sharp from the moment you're awake to the moment you're asleep. Yeah. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask you a question on what you said
Yeah.
about my being demanding? Was that actually when I asked you about cutting the flowers?
No, it's when you're quiet.
It's actually a permanent condition.
It's all the time.
It's all the time.
It just comes. It's not in action. It's a feeling.
It's the same with Jad. It's a permanent condition.
And Maddie.
And Maddie's
And
the same.
Maddie's the
Yeah.
same.
Permanent
Is
condition.
that only towards you, or can you?
Everyone.
Me.
Everyone.
Yeah, there's a few hands
Everyone.
there.
A lot of women won't. The older a woman gets, generally, the less she sees it, or the less she'll feel it. But it's towards every woman.
I'm trying to find the chord.
Need to put those. It's a bit rustly for the sound. People do it.
I'm trying to find the cause of that. But I'm struggling.
Well, it is going to be a struggle because it's been something that's been happening from the moment you were conceived. Well, it's the way you've been brought up by your mother specifically, and it's going to be difficult to address because it's been there your entire. The reason why it's so hard for you to know it is because it's been there all your life and it's normal to you. It's a normal state, and the same applies to Maddie and Jad. It's just a normal state, and so getting out of states that you believe are just normal are very, very difficult because it requires a lot of sincerity for you to discover something. And there is an internal feeling that everyone who's telling you is wrong. Every time they tell you something, you're going to feel they're wrong because for you, what you're doing is right. Does that make sense?
Normal.
Well, it's normal. It's like, yeah. So let's say you were 30 and you never had this problem up until you were 30, and then all of a sudden something happened in your life, and a woman started projecting the things that your mother projected at you when you were a child. You would feel, oh, this is really bad. But because it's been done from the moment you were conceived, it's the only thing you know. And because it's the only thing you know, it's going to require a lot of really clear, strong self-analysis to actually discover the cause and even discover that it's even there,
To feel
to
sensitive.
even feel even that it's there.
Yeah.
And you can have hundreds of people around you telling you it's there and still believe it's not there yourself. And in fact, what I find happens is that if you have a faith in yourself, which is a certain false faith in yourself, a faith that's corrupt, you will believe that is true until you change your mind. You can have 1 million people telling you you're wrong, and you still will not change your mind. Does that make sense? So the key is to discover what the corrupt faith is, and that does require a lot of sincerity, because nobody else has to do that for you. They can help you by being honest. So every time the girls say to you, "This is what you're doing," that's got the potential to help you, but not if the corrupt faith is saying, "No, they're wrong." You know, while the corrupt faith is saying, "No, they're wrong," then of course you're not going to be hearing anything and not being able to identify. And so this is going to be a problem, and this is the damage, what I would call the multi-generational sin-based damage that occurs to all of us, is that we were conceived with it being normal. And so what we believe is normal, loving thing to do, from God's perspective, is very, often very much the opposite. And to get God's perspective requires a number of things of us. And one of the things, obviously one of the things it requires is becoming an emotional being. Now, one of the problems you face is that you're being taught not to be an emotional being from your childhood as well. So that's normal as well. And to be an emotional being for you is like outrageous, almost, like to even consider doing that, right? For the other two boys, they were allowed to be emotional beings to a degree. You weren't allowed to do it at all, pretty much. So that'll be an additional blockage to being able to discover what these things are. And for the boys, though, they've been provided this other problem, which is worse than you, and that is they believe that everything they want from everybody, they're justified in their rage when they don't get it. You don't have a tendency to get extremely angry when you don't get something. You just get more projecty.
You're just like, what's wrong? You're hurting me. What's wrong with you?
These boys get more angry. And so they're more prone to violence in their state when you're less prone to violence. Does that make sense? So, and again, the prone to violence is a normal feeling, because they've been taught from childhood that a boy who doesn't get what he wants is allowed to get violent with a girl. And Jada gets violent in a different way than Maddie gets violent with girls. You follow? But for you, you don't have a tendency to get violent. You just have a tendency to withdraw a bit more and project a bit more. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Still an angry state, but it's not as potentially violent as what the boys could do.
Is it coming from that I was brought up by sort of projecting at my mother that she should provide for me?
Well, if you think about your childhood and how much interaction you had with your father compared to your mother.
Very little.
Yeah, so you even if you compare it in hours, like in the course of a 24-hour day, what was your average contact with your dad?
He was working full time and my mother was home with me.
Correct.
Because we have two brothers.
So your average contact with dad might 5-10 minutes a day, for many men that's the case.
Yeah.
With their dad. With your mum, average contact with her, pretty close to every waking hour during the formative years of your childhood. So if you look at that, you can go, wow, my relationship with my mum must have governed, even just logically, must have governed almost everything I do now. That makes sense? And so this is the trouble with a child not having a balanced upbringing with both genders, because they end up hooking into one gender more than the other, and therefore also receiving almost all their injuries from that one gender rather than the other.
Yeah. And also, like I was feeling about just the multi-generational thing, like Sorsh and I with our dads, and then what that does in our relationship with men. But Elias has the feeling that I don't really have to do much to be adored, and you have that feeling. So he just has to be, and he's adored. You know, he's so cute, he's so lovely. Oh, look at him do the thing. You know, so
you guys even adore him when he's sinning.
Yeah.
Which is actually, when you think about it, quite wrong.
It feels so
There's
bad.
a difference between loving a child and adoring him while he's sinning, isn't there? Like, you can see.
But I would suggest your mother adored you while you were sinning, and also you didn't have
In fact, for the most part, your mother created your sins and felt justified in doing so, and that's why she adored you while you were sinning, because she thought those sins were exactly what she wanted.
So now your normal is every woman is just like attentive to me and adoring of me and telling me that I'm wonderful emotionally, and that's normal.
And if you don't feel that from a woman, you
you're
feel,
like, what's going
this
on?
woman doesn't like me. What's going on? You know.
So from when you're that age, you've got that feeling that like, oh, just be, and everything happens for me, and everything, and I'm better than mum. I'm better than women.
I'm better than dad.
I'm better than dad. She gives mum gives me all this loveliness, and dad she hardly
spends any time with.
So I'm obviously the best man in this house, you know.
Yep.
And when you're given a lot of attention like that as well, you actually become very dependent on women to do anything, because
Well, it's more the opposite, isn't it? You believe that's a normal state, and you become angry when that normal state isn't achieved.
yes,
Sort of like so there's an extreme amount of rage underlying
so
when it's not achieved. But because you've been taught to be stoic as well, you're not allowed to express that rage either. So it's very hard for you to even recognise the level of rage that you're in, given the fact that you were taught not to be in a rage as well. Whereas little Elias, he expresses his rage, right? He's like in it. You know, the moment he doesn't get what he wants, he's in it. You know, and so in that regard, it's being highlighted to him. He's not getting what he wants.
he's actually learning to manipulate now.
Yeah.
He's learning to suggest, to redirect, to get what he wants, and then if all of that doesn't work, then he's in a rage.
And
But
so that's why
so
you've got to
he-
restrict him while he goes through all those other things.
Yeah, but you can see how we develop into these facades where we're like, oh, I'm not in a rage. I just like want to go to mum now. You know, it's innocent. It's just because you're not meeting my addictions as much. But that's not it. I just really like mum, you know. And you can see how as an adult man, then you're like, oh, I'm just not interested in this woman anymore. I'm quite romantically involved with this one, you know. And it's just, can be the same thing. Yeah.
I've had this rage coming up all week.
Yep. Every one of you in this state will have to go through rage at some point, obviously. Yeah. But remember what I said to Ange. The rage is an expression of the deeper of the corrupt faith that you have. So the key is to utilize your rage in a way of finding your corrupt faith, rather than as a justification of your corrupt faith. So at the moment, you've got a tendency to use it as a justification to retain a corrupt faith, rather than as a way to identify and get into and release your corrupt faith.
And feeling how much it's driving a lot of my, like it has driven so much of my behaviour in the past.
All of your interactions with women.
Yeah, like, but in those times I wouldn't have recognised I was in a rage. But I'm
Correct.
like, holy shit! No, this is what I was actually feeling.
Correct. Well, this is the feeling you're denying by needing the contact with the women. Does that make sense? The rage is there, and then underneath the rage is the corrupt faith that drives that rage, which is the actual feeling you're denying. That's the painful feeling, the thing you're going to have to grieve, the loss of that thing. Yeah.
So there's no repentance in that stage.
While you're in a rage?
Yeah.
None.
So there's no repentance, and there's also no desire for forgiveness.
No. No, because you internally feel justified that your corruption should remain. So there's no repentance or forgiveness in that place. Yep. You've got to get to the stage where you want to feel the underlying thing, and then you're capable of some potential desires of repentance.
Yes.
Yeah.
The desire naturally happens in that place.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Is that why I'm always angry at Anna? I have this sort of underlying.
Yep.
Because I guess she doesn't really meet my expectations.
She does meet a lot of them, but not all of them. It's pretty much
what?
with a mother like your own, and like with Jada and Maddie, it's pretty unlikely you're ever going to meet a woman who actually meets as many as your mother meets. And so this is why a lot of men say, "Oh, my mum's always the best woman in my life," because the mother has created the addiction in the child, and the child now has pretty much all of his addictions met by his mother. So my brother is in that state. My younger brother, he's 10 years younger than I am, and he's in the state where he believes mum is the best woman in the world, pretty much.
My brother is like that too.
And Mary's brother is like that too. The mothers have invested so much in them that those men have never met another woman who meets their addictions as much as their mother. And that's pretty normal, actually, for many men, because it was their mother who met most of their addictions for the most part. Not all men are like that. So, Rob, you're obviously not the same as that, because your mother had sort of rage and anger towards you, and so she had no intention of meeting your addictions. My mother towards me was much the same. So she had no intention of meeting any of my addictions. I was created to meet hers, not the other way around. Whereas for these other types of women, they usually what happens is they usually have poor relationship with their partner, and they overly invest emotionally, incestuously invest in their son as a substitute to their relationship with their partner, and then of course it just gets worse and worse and worse after that. So these men grow up. My wife Cherie, who I was married to 30 years ago now, she did that with our youngest son. So she emotionally invested in him, used him as a substitute. He became the most important child. He also became the most important man in the house. As a result, he felt he could treat myself and Tristan badly, and he had no worries of doing that at all.
Well, he sees it as normal.
He sees it as normal.
He doesn't even see it as bad.
He doesn't even see it as bad treatment. And he's just got this feeling of that he's superior, and women have a tendency to fawn over him as a result. Even though he's not a very kind person to most women, actually.
What is fawn for?
You're so wonderful. Love you. Can I bask in your...
It's an addictive
He's so nice.
adoration. Because true adoration is lovely, isn't it?
It is.
But an addiction adoration is actually quite terrible.
It's like fight, flight or fawn. Up there with those.
All the F words.
And there's a bit of the other F word in there as well. Fawning turns into the other one, yeah. And then that becomes a whole barter. Yeah. But you can sort of see why mum can never compare, because if you look at Elias now, if you're a mum who's not feeling her emotions and you're in that addiction, they are so cute, and you it's not like when you get older you're less cute now, guys. You know, and there's more demands.
Your demands coming out of you now, for most women, unless they're exactly like your mother, most women won't find it cute. Most women won't find it nice at all, actually. Yeah. And so, but when you're a little child, almost every woman finds it cute.
Yeah, and they he's a little heartbreaker, isn't he? And all that stuff. And so you grow up in this soup of like, oh no, wonderful. And then you get older and you're like, oh no, wonderful. And everyone's like, oh. You're like, oh, bitches.
It's such a bad thing, because I can see I do that with Elias too, but with the other men I'm like, oh. But it's like, to
see that that is what I'm creating, what I'm doing.
That's right. It's very important.
That's what I connected to, was how do I actually feel when Elias is coming up to me? And that's when I could connect to, I feel the same as like these other adults. It feels oppressive. I feel like I have to be interested, but I'm actually not. So why am I showing him that I'm interested? There's something in me. I'm going to stop doing that and just be real me, like I try to be with the adult guys. And that naturally was so much better for both of us. Stop treating him like a 2-year-old, yeah.
If I'm in a group with, say, Ella, Mary and Sorsh, and I'm there, I'm the only man there, Elias completely ignores me. Like I'm not a person. He's already at the stage where I'm not a person. And he's only, what, 2.5, 3? Yep. So that just shows you what happens with addictions in terms of how they get developed and how strong they become. So he completely ignores me unless he tries to badger me with something. I have to restrict him, and then he's angry with me. That's the only interactions we have at the moment. Can't have any others because I'm lesser than he is in his own emotional state, in his own estimation. So he already believes I'm less than he is, and he's only 2.5, right? So you imagine if I'm the husband, let's say I'm Sorsh's husband, and Sorsh had that investment in the child, he would already believe that I'm less in your eyes than he is. Does that make sense? So he already knows that he's better than Dad. So he's already going to start acting like he's better than Dad, like he can demand more things from Mum, like he can spend more of Mum's time. He's already going to believe that no matter what I say and do, I'm nowhere near as good as he is. And that's by the time he's 2.5.
Like, why does he think he was better than the men around him?
Well, partly because if a person gives somebody more of their time, more of their energy, more of their effort, then doesn't that, like when I do that with you guys, you automatically think that means you're nice, right?
Not that you're nice.
Not that I'm nice.
I've had this thing with that comes up for me with about thinking about talking to women or whatever.
Yep.
I feel I have this panic that anything I share with a woman is going to get, particularly sharing my emotions, how I really feel about things, like it's all going to get used against me. And I feel like that's happened my entire life from every woman, right from the first woman I started dating, well, my mum as well. And I don't know, I just feel this level of
rage about it.
Yeah. Oh, I don't know where I'm going with it, but like I feel like it's not that easy to talk to women.
Well, it isn't. The reality is, as we know, with intergender emotional injuries, most women are extremely angry with men, and most women do have a very strong feeling of rage towards men because of how they've been treated by men. Does that make sense? And so most women are looking for
certain things.
You know, they're looking to put the spotlight on your injuries, just to put you in your place a bit, right? But if you can feel like my feelings are, well, if you look at the underlying reason why that is, it's because they've been treated badly, and your motive is to treat women badly generally. So you're actually increasing their desire to put the spotlight on you and to pull you to bits. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And also, Jad, aren't you? I haven't been in many conversations with you, but are you reacting to them just not meeting your addiction, and you like just reflecting back to you something about yourself that you don't like because you're so entitled to feeling that you're good with women? You're going to be prone to feeling that they are pulling you apart because
they're just saying a truth,
challenging your facade, you know. So this is where you
well, that's where I feel mixed up.
Yeah, you're not going to know.
It's going to be mixing up.
You're not going to know what's what, really. To be honest. Because the level of demand you have coming out of you you're going to think that anything just a woman saying no to you is going to be like,
Oh, she's
what?
pulling me down. Yeah.
You know, you don't think I'm worthy now because you didn't want to do that for me, type of thing. Yeah. And a woman, you know, she's just as allowed to say no as you are about any matter, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the depth of the emotional response is indicative of the depth of the injury, isn't it?
I have lived a big part of my life having this desire that I don't want to be here. I long to come home to God, was what I said during those years. But I recently has got the idea what I was wanting was dying. I wanted to. I didn't want to live.
Mom, look!
And so that must be anger. So it's
Well, not wanting to live is certainly anger, yes.
Yeah. So that's a new thing for me, that I have lived most of my life in anger.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think anybody who meets you can feel your anger if they're sensitive to it. You know, the very first time I met you, I think I said to Mary that you're quite an angry person and you don't know it yet. No. But, you know, again, it's your normal. And this is the thing that all of us have got to come to terms with, is the fact that there are certain things within us that are our normal, that we don't even clock. We're not even aware, because it's our normal. It's been like that since the time we were conceived, and often during our life nothing's changed over that period of life, and the emotions grow and become more intense. So the real struggle you have is not with things that are obviously bad. You know, so for example, some of you often say, oh, the very worst thing I've ever done is like, you know, they're going to have to deal with is like having an abortion or something like that. Well, you know, an abortion, once you hear the truth of it, you can see that it's obviously bad. Yep. When you've been brought up right from the moment of conception to believe a certain thing, it's very hard for you to see it as obviously bad. In fact, to you, it's obviously good. It's the complete opposite. Even though, from God's perspective, it could be very bad and actually drive many, many bad and evil desires that you have. And so it's really, the difficulty we face is not so much the things that are obvious, right? It's the things that are not obvious to me and your things not obvious to you that are going to be the most difficult things for you to address.
It's harder to see.
Harder to see, they're harder to see, they're harder to identify, and because they've been with you longer, they're also harder to release, because they're harder to get to the bottom of. Make sense? So at some stage you've got to come to terms with that. You sort of got to go, this is how it is. There's obviously things that I think are good in me that are very bad, because I have been that way right from the beginning of my conception onwards. I've been taught that they're good, and so that's now a normal state for me to believe they're good. Yeah.
I would never. I mean, I think I felt that 1 year ago or earlier, when I got feedback from you and you said that I was angry, that was sort of me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Well, on top of that, you've been taught to be stoic as well, so that makes it hard to even identify your anger. And in fact, many of us that have been taught to be stoic sort of go into this state of going, well, what's anger? I don't even know what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, I've never been angry all my life. I don't even know what it feels like. But again, that doesn't mean that there's not the anger there. It just means that you're not aware of what's there. Yeah. And Stoicism is a great way of avoiding anger. And in a culture where anger is treated as if it's weak, and in the Swedish culture, anger is generally treated as if it's a weak emotion. In those kind of cultures, anger is even less acknowledged than it would be somewhere like in Brazil, where anger is treated like anybody's allowed to be angry. You know what I mean?
Every 5 minutes.
So or let's say in
Japanese culture would have trouble with anger.
well, yeah, they do have a lot of trouble with anger. Very similar to Swedish culture with regard to anger. So some cultures are more prone to certain types of injuries as well. And so this is why you've got to go, well, give up the idea of what you believe yourself to be.
The facade.
And focus instead your attention on, okay, what is actually there? You know, asking God what is actually there, what's actually going on. What was my childhood actually like? Not what I believe it's like now, because even what you believe your childhood is like now, as an adult, what you believe now, what your childhood was, is in error. Because again, it was indoctrination from the moment you were conceived into that environment.
I didn't understand that is an error. What did you mean? I
It's an error from God's perspective. In error.
It's in error.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
From God's perspective.
Of course.
From the moment you were conceived, you were living in an environment that had a large amount of error from God's perspective.
Yeah.
But that environment was telling you that all of those things that are, from God's perspective, are in error, in your family's perspective, are true and good. Otherwise, your family wouldn't have done it. You understand? They wouldn't have brought you up in the manner they did, unless they believed they were good doing it, right? And so they've taught you from the moment you were conceived that whatever they chose to do with you was good. And so breaking that, it's really an indoctrination, isn't it? You could say it's emotional brainwashing, really, which is what occurs to everybody, you know, on earth, except if you're brought up by people who love. You know, unless you were brought up by two people who are at one with God. And unless that's true, you will be brought up in error. You will have a lot of error that you believe is true. And that is the main problem, that you still believe it's true. You still believe there's nothing wrong with it. You still believe that there's, you know, that it was good, you know, and so forth. Now, there are times where that's not true, where, let's say, you've been abused as a child, and it's quite obvious what kind of abuse you received. Well, that's a bit easier, actually, to see, oh, well, I was brought up with some error there. It's the areas where you weren't abused as a child, or that you didn't believe yourself to be abused as a child, that are actually where most of the abuse actually occurred, generally.
I thought up to my 20s, perhaps 30s, I can't remember, that I had a perfect family.
When I met Jesus, defended them to the hilt, you know? And then you scratch the surface, you're like, oh, crap.
Yeah, it's awful.
That's what they want me to believe.
Yes.
Yeah, the average person feels that way. Yep.
It's not just what they wanted me to believe, like with some of the things I'm feeling at the moment. I am so invested in this belief about myself now.
For a lot of emotional reasons.
So many.
Because if you can stay in the same belief system as your family, then it means you're always going to be accepted by at least your family.
Yes.
But as soon as you take on a different set of belief systems from your family, you are not going to be accepted by your family. This is what I'm saying to many of you who have not yet had arguments with your family. That's because you fundamentally still have the same emotional belief systems as them. Because once your fundamental emotional belief systems change, there will undoubtedly be arguments and fights. Because because they are going to disagree with what you now accept as the truth emotionally, which they still think is a lie. They will believe their lie is the truth, and that's how it's going to be. So unless those arguments are occurring, it's indicative of the fact you're still desperate to be accepted by your own family, and therefore desperate to retain the same belief systems as your family, which, by the way, were an emotional brainwashing that occurred right from childhood, and not God's truth on the matter. You know, there might have been moments where there was God's truth, but it's rare that, you know, on earth at the moment there's no parents that are in a state of perfection. So there is no child who is not injured by in the manner that I'm talking about. And the key as an adult, once we become adults, is to discover how our view of the world and our view of ourselves is so much in disharmony with God's view of the world and God's view of ourselves. Yeah.
It feels to me as well, it's not just like my family now as well. I feel like, well, they've indoctrinated me, but now I also have these things in society, like what a woman is. And the
society has participated.
Yeah.
Your education as a child participated. Your socialised upbringing participated. Your culture participated.
Yes.
You know, and each culture is different. Many of you, like, so for yourself, what's your Chinese culture, or
Yes.
you know, then you've got Swedish culture, and then you've got what else we've got Polish culture, and you've got Canadian Dutch culture.
Yeah.
You know, we've got all different cultures here,
Yeah.
right? We're going to have very different beliefs of what is true and what is false as a result of that. Just because of cultural rituals, yeah. Because the culture itself has a certain base set of injuries about all sorts of matters that you lived in and you grew up believing it's
the way it is.
The way it is. It's
So you're
normal.
going to end up having a fight, aren't you? Family, culture, just everything.
Correct.
Really.
So what happens when you start breaking these roles, the family role, the cultural role, and everything? You start having. Not that you want to argue, but everyone wants to argue with you.
Yeah.
Your family will want to argue with you. Your culture will want to argue with you. You know, the society you're in will want to argue with you. So this is why I said in the first century, you'll be in the world, but not of it. You will be different to the world, and the world, as a result, will think, "What's wrong with these people?" And this is something you got to get used to. You know.
So if they don't argue with you, though, they avoid you as well, so that you, when you're saying that's an argument.
Well, there's an argument. Yeah,
okay.
There's an argument. It's just saying we're going to shun you.
Yeah, okay.
Which is
this is your punishment.
This is your punishment for being different to us.
But there's also a lot of sadness, isn't there, when we get to that point?
Of course.
There's just a lot of sadness.
Of course.
But you can see why you didn't want to face that.
That's right. That's right. And as a child, very hard to face.
Yeah, like, for example, a good example of this, I feel, was yesterday morning. For the first time, Rob left stuff on the bench for me, and I just said, "Hey, Dal, you haven't finished." And then this morning it happened again, and I just left it, and it's taken me all this time to get to that point
where
I couldn't.
Where if
where
he
I
doesn't
couldn't
tidy
just
up himself,
go
you're going to leave it.
angry,
Yeah.
you know, just go into the anger and go, not, you know, get over it, do it, you know. So the first time, and I have been fighting that one for so long.
Mind you, see, I wouldn't leave it.
Good thing to do.
Yeah. But you mean you first time you accessed your sadness about that rather than anger? Is
I've
that what
been
you're saying?
sad about it for a couple of weeks. But I just feel like yesterday was the first time I could, because like, I could just say it without feeling any guilt or, you know, I'm a bad person. I would just, you know, he's doing other stuff.
But you don't actually think you're a bad person when you're angry with him about not doing it. So that doesn't make
Say that
sense.
again.
You think he's a bad person for leaving the stuff on the bench.
Yes.
So it doesn't make sense that when you say you feel guilty about pointing it out to him, because that's, you don't actually feel guilty about it. You feel righteous and you feel he's wrong.
Yeah, I do. I feel that as well.
Yeah, so your guilt is not real.
So why is it that I
You don't want to,
rather get angry?
yes. Then say something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What do you feel when you say something?
Oh.
Well, it's fair to say you don't want to feel what. That's why you don't say something.
Because I don't want to feel it.
You don't want to feel what comes up for you when you say something.
Well, yes, normally if I say something, then I kind of backtrack and feel bad about it.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that's not a real bad feeling. That, like, I don't understand that feeling. Because you don't feel bad bossing Rob. Emotionally bossing Rob. So when you say something to him and then you feel bad, there's some furphy going on there. About why you're actually feeling bad. It's not because you feel bad about being angry with Rob. Because you don't.
Ange wouldn't have been allowed to say that in her family of origin, I reckon. Like she wouldn't have been able to speak to the men in her.
But she obviously feels like anger is an effective method of bossing the man.
Yeah.
Unspoken rage, or even spoken rage, projected rage. You feel that that's a legitimate way to get what you want.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. Something doesn't gel there. Something's not.
I'm not quite sure. It's not gelling.
Like, I don't see you feeling guilty about your feelings towards Rob. Not yet. Not a sincere feeling of, like, it's a wrong. It's not like you're still in the fight for it being right. So the feeling bad about saying something to him is about, I don't know what that is, but it's not. Either you think...
Why would you feel bad about saying something to him anyway?
To me, that's a more loving thing to do.
I don't think I felt bad about saying something.
Oh, that's what you said.
No,
that you felt guilty about saying something.
Well, in the past I have. In the past...
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That doesn't make any sense. Why do you feel bad in the past for saying something when you don't feel bad about it?
Oh, yeah, no, not a lot. No, just kind of...
It's not the thing you feel bad about.
No, it's not saying something.
The thing you feel bad about is he's not treating you with respect.
Yeah. That's your sadness.
Yeah. And that's where your sadness is, that you don't want to feel it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Because I don't want to feel that, that's when I think, mostly I feel bad about leaving the thing, or, you know...
That makes more sense.
Yeah, leaving the clothes on the line, or leaving the cup on the table, or, you know...
Yeah,
but that's not about Rob.
Yeah, it's not about Rob, though.
No.
What's that about? You know what that's about.
Well, yeah, it comes from what I felt I had to do, the bartering.
No. What you feel you have to do comes from a thing. So
What I feel I have to do
comes from a feeling inside of you first. So, and no, it's not a bartering feeling. You're actually very angry about doing anything for a man, but you feel like you have to do the thing to tidy up after him. So why do you need to tidy up? What's that about? Think about your family. What's it's about? What's about with your mum?
What's a good person?
Yeah.
No, just don't.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, she...
Why is your mum tidy?
Why is she tidy? She's not.
Why are you tidy?
Because that was my role.
No, you just think about what you just said about your mum.
Feel
I said, why is your mum tidy? You said she's not. Your
Not
mum's a
compared
mess,
to me,
right?
Like,
Your mum's a messer, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, she's tidy, but not like me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what do you feel about you being the way that you are?
Well, I'm better than her. That's one way I can be
So,
better than
so
her.
it's all about impression.
Yeah.
Why you have to tidy is all about impression you want to give others. It's not about, like, so you got the disrespect emotion going on, where you're being disrespected, and then you got on top of that the impression you want to make.
Yeah. The impression.
Impression.
Impression, yes.
The impression you want to
Yeah,
make.
yeah, yeah, because that was all she was worried about.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Your mums are just completely worried about how everything looks.
And me too.
Of course. Of course. So having a mess around that's there for a moment.
Yeah.
Like, if it's one thing if Rob prepared his meal, sat down, ate the meal, then got back up and fixed it. But in the
I
state,
beat him to it.
exactly, in the state you're in, you won't even let him do that. Do you understand?
He's in trouble the minute his knife hits them.
Because of the impression you want to give to others, right?
And also I noticed, like, you and Rob seem to struggle a lot because your definitions of love, even after all this time, are so completely different. You think Rob loves you by doing a certain set of things.
Yep.
And Rob thinks that he loves you by doing a whole heap of other things that aren't on your list. And so you end up feeling like, oh, Rob doesn't love me. Whereas I often feel Rob's more interested in pleasing you, or, you know, having affection for you. Yeah.
Well,
But
he's given up on having affection.
yeah, he has. He's a sadness.
It's improved a bit lately, but I mean, try it. Yeah, what I notice many people trying to do, which is what you're trying to do here, is you're trying to make it all about one thing. But often our issues are much more complicated than that. There are often many reasons why we choose to do one thing. And it's not just one reason for the most part. Yeah.
So with that, when there's many reasons, that's just a real humility issue, isn't it? Like,
That's right.
You've just got to go with the one and then be humble to that.
Yeah. So if you think about the circumstances here, it's quite easy to find the many issues, because if Rob just left a mess and went out the door, and you weren't there and you couldn't yell at him, you'd still feel like you have to tidy up his mess. Right? Wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And you'd probably yell at him when he got home, or got upset with him when he got home because of having to do it. But you'd still feel like, whereas if Mary leaves a mess on the kitchen and I walk in and see it and I go, unless it's impacting me personally, I won't tidy it up. And when I say impacting me, unless like there's no dishes and I can't cook something or something like that, then I'll tidy it up. Or if I can't wash the dishes myself, I'll have to wipe her dishes or whatever.
Yes, that's.
Then I do that. But what I'm saying is that in the situation, you can see there's many different things going on in this situation. So the first thing is he's leaving something there. How long he leaves it is almost immaterial. So that's one issue, isn't it? Where he's not allowed to even leave it just and relaxedly eat and just leave the mess. He's got to sort it out quick. As, you know, that's an issue in itself. Even though you've got other dishes available and you could use them and so forth, and you could tidy up your mess. And if you wanted to leave his, you could decide to leave his even. But you can't, because there's a number of different issues going on, you see.
Other issues.
Yeah. The reason why you're upset with him is one issue. The reason why you have to tidy up is another one. Does that make sense?
There's probably others as well.
And there's others, yeah. So, and this is the thing, is that instead of just going, oh, it's all the one issue, and frequently what I see people do, and Mary used to do this a lot, where she'd say to me, oh, I'm really a bit confused because I think I do it for this reason, but then I'm going, well, that's not very logical, because actually if you look at the circumstance, it's always in this circumstance and in that circumstance and in this circumstance, and you do a different thing in that circumstance and so forth. So it's not the one thing you're saying, obviously, because logically, if it was, there would be a logical one thing you do as a result. You know what I mean? So there's got to be more than one thing's involved here. the key is to be humble enough to see them all,
Yeah.
not just see the one.
Yeah.
Or see the preferred one.
Yes, the one
In the
you're
case,
comfortable with.
the preferred one is Rob's being unloving.
Yeah.
So that's the preferred one,
Yeah.
not I'm being unloving.
Yeah.
That's not the preferred one, right? So we often want to see a preferred injury, and we might be right on the preferred one,
But skip over our
but skip over all the other things that are actually going on
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
You understand?
So, is the reason why we want to only like focus on one thing is because that's our preferred, but also we won't think, okay, it's only one issue. It's not like actually see the complexity.
We don't
of it
want
and see
we
how
don't want
huge
complexity. We don't want to feel overwhelmed. We want to feel in control. We want to feel like we got it down. We understand when we really don't. There's a whole heap of things we want to feel versus what we don't want to feel, right? Yep.
Is it like the cults? They're all the different cults, the family cult,
Yep.
and we can't kind of isolate them all. We have to actually feel the whole thing.
That's right. Every cult had its own influence on us, but oftentimes they were in agreement with the other cults as well. So you get doubling up of things in that process. So it's not as simple. You think in the reason why for the majority of us life isn't simple is because our injuries are very complicated. Yep. And they're complicated and they happened over many years. And the key is to love yourself while you work through them, but don't avoid them. Right? Don't ignore them. You've got to work through them still. And the key is really getting to the stage where you can be in a state of repentance about them, because then you can get help to dealing with them. Other than that, the law of compensation is just going to be grinding you through them. Yeah. So the key is really to get to the stage where I want to know the truth about them. And I want to know all the truth, not just the bits that I prefer, or the bits that are easy, or the bits that I understand. And I've got to know everything about them, really, is what I'm aiming for. The more you understand, it's like with all truth, the more you understand, the easier a life will be. Yeah. The majority of us feel the more we understand, the more confused we become. Can you see that? Yeah. For the majority of us, we like to not have too much going on at the same time.
Just this much, Jesus, not that much. Just tell me that much.
And simplicity. We just want it to be simple.
Yeah, we want it to be a simple solution. Yeah. But what happened to us were very complicated problems. Yeah. Mixed up between our family and mum and dad and our siblings and our work, our children, other children and society issues and culture issues. They're not going to be simple to resolve.
And mum and dad weren't always consistent in what they wanted either.
One day they wanted to murder us, and the next day they wanted to give us a hug. Like what's going on? Do you know what I mean?
So you're like, when I get this feeling and this nuance from this person, then my injury says I should respond this way. But if there's this slightly different nuance, then maybe I should behave this whole other way, or I'm so offended, and it's all because there was all this stuff happening.
Now God knows exactly what has happened to each one of his children. He knows exactly what has happened. And our celestial spirit friends also know exactly what has happened, because they're in tune with God's love now, so they know exactly what's happened. For the majority of us on earth, we don't know exactly what's happened. We have no idea, really. And unless you have some kind of an investigative spirit, an inquisitive spirit about your own life, you will never know what's happened. Unless you're willing to ask and find out, you'll never know. The key is to want to know. Because having the spirit where you want to know, you'll eventually know. Yeah. You'll understand all the intricacies and the nuances. And
so that's the state of repentance, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the emotion that cause you to get urine tract infection, is that anger?
I don't know if I want to talk about the specific emotions in your case now, because now I just feel the question was completely selfishly motivated.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yep. Every physical symptom has an emotional cause.
Yes.
So what process would you go through to discover it?
Ask God.
Well, you can ask a person, can't you? But are you going to be convinced of the answer if it's something that you don't want to hear? Probably not, right? So what would you do? Where does a urinary tract infection occur? So, like, let's say I've got an injury in my thumb. Where does the injury occur? On my thumb. Where does a urinary tract infection occur?
In the urine tract.
Yeah, but so it's in the
Yeah.
in the vagina, isn't it? Okay. So what would that indicate? It's got to have something to do with your what? Sexual organs. Yeah. So what would it have to do?
Being pissed off.
Sorry?
Being pissed off.
Who's had a urinary
Well, it
tract
causes
infection
pain with urination,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It causes, and basically it's bacteria
Yeah.
in the urinary tract, isn't it?
Yeah.
Causing pain of urination. So, like if we're investigating this with the techniques we've learnt, and we're applying love, truth, humility, faith, and action to this question, what are we going to be asking ourselves about?
Well, why I said that is that I've had it
Yeah.
a few times,
Yeah.
quite a few times, and I found out that every time I was pissed off, I really was pissed off.
With what though?
Well, probably something the man did or something like that.
Be more
hang
specific.
on, be more specific. Remember what Jesus said about anger. That's just the thing you do as a smokescreen for the real emotion going
Exactly.
on.
So there'd be an event before it happens.
Yeah, I have a
One to
theory
suppress.
from my own experience.
See, this is the kind of thing you
I'd
do.
be interested
You can
to
create some theories, can't you?
Yeah.
This is how I've discovered all my truth that I've discovered. You create some theories, but let's look at the basics. The basics are, it's happened in a certain region of your body. It's impacting you a certain way. These parts need to be assessed, do they not? There's a logical relationship between where it's happened and how it's affecting you and what the original cause was. So what would the possible original cause be if it's affecting you? You can't wee without pain, and it's affecting your sexual organs.
Yeah, so sexual.
So what's it about? Probably, like, I'm not going to tell you what it's about. What I'm asking you.
Well, I've got theories, but yeah.
Use
what
your
do you guys think?
investigative.
Sexual anger towards the opposite gender or the gender that you're sexually interested in.
That wasn't me.
Well, under the
Something about flow.
not wanting to give sexually.
I'll tell you my theory, see what you guys reckon. Shame about engaging in sex that I don't want.
I was thinking sex, when I've had sex that I didn't want to do.
When I had sex that I didn't want to do,
I would get thrush under those conditions.
yes,
pretty much every time.
Yes, thrush, urinary tract. I had them both at once. Yeah. That's when you have like a yeast infection in your vagina.
Itchy and itchy. But that would often turn into a urinary tract infection. So that
Correct.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, linked.
Okay, so
So
let's say we come up with that theory.
it's still not solid.
We're still not solid. We still don't know exactly, right? But we've come up with this theory. So what would you do now?
investigate the theory.
So how do you investigate this theory?
What happened before it all started?
So you want to
What
know
was I
what happened
avoiding
a few
feeling?
days before it started? Yeah, that's important, isn't it? Because usually a couple of days before an infection occurs is when the trigger occurred. So what happened? What went on? So, you might find, you sort of felt a bit forced into sexual activity, for example, or you felt like the man was demanding sex from you and you didn't really want to give it, or let's say you felt those things. So that would have to be added to your evidence, wouldn't it?
And it could be that I'm angry about that, but suppressing the anger as well.
Okay, so that'd be added to the evidence. What else?
Yeah, and that the man doesn't care about you sexually.
That he's just doing it for his own sake?
Yeah,
Yep, of course. But again, you'd have to
feel.
You'd have to feel that, and you'd say, well, that's probably how I felt. So you got to add that to the list.
Has anyone had a urinary tract infection that wasn't after sexual activity? Yes. Okay.
So.
Yeah. So what you guys now can add to our investigation?
Could it be with sexual projections, because I didn't have any sexual activity?
Okay, so you add that to the possibility. So now we're writing a list, right? So there's another possibility. What else?
And I had a feeling a couple of days
Prior.
before that my husband was actually having sex with someone else.
Okay, so that's something worth adding to the question, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the partner being unfaithful or infidelity in some way, which could also be physical, but it could also be emotional, couldn't it? And it could also be like to do with porn, all sorts of things. That could be, couldn't it?
Yeah, interesting.
I see it when I was a little girl, so
Yes,
that
so-
must be something to do with what's happening with my dad and I, or
No, your mum.
my mum.
So what was going on with your mum?
Oh well, my dad was having affairs, so it could have been exactly when that was happening.
So you add that to the list of all that. Yes. What else? Anybody else?
What
Yep.
Go on.
Yeah, okay. What happened was that we were having persons with us, and we were sitting out on the veranda, and I didn't notice that I got really cold down here around, and until several hours had gone. And that night after that, I got the urine horrible.
Yeah, but that it's never due to any physical thing.
Okay.
So it's got to be an emotional thing that was happening at the time.
What happened in interaction?
Interaction. What happened in that interaction?
So why did you lose the warmth in your body in that area
why
of
were
your
you
body
disconnected from
when
that
you
area
were
of
with
your
those
body?
people?
I got angry.
What about?
I actually had recollection now how it was 2019 during the VSP, and I was sort of hammered a lot emotionally and couldn't sort of defend myself, and I sort of had a realization that that was what happened that time, and we talked a bit of it, and not that not so much, but
Was it with men or women?
A woman.
But kidneys, because your kidneys got the chill, right? And that's fear, isn't it? Isn't it? I think it kidneys and fear.
Let's add that to the equation. So you need to be more specific, Anna, because you're not being that truthful about that.
My daughter had it a fair bit.
Yeah.
And
How old was she?
Oh, she was probably 4,
Yeah.
3 and 4.
Okay, so it has to be something to do with mum and dad.
Yeah, yes, and I was sexually demanding on my ex-wife at the time.
And she was trying to fight you off.
Yes.
Yes.
And engaging in sex that she didn't want.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right.
That's definitely.
So that's you'd add that to the.
Yes.
With that sleep state,
Now you're being a bit. By the time you get to the sleep state stuff, you're often ignoring a lot of reality of what's happening in your awake state. So my suggestion is focus on your awake state. Worry about your sleep state when everything else is exhausted. You understand?
Not speaking up, like about sexual issues or like having sex when I didn't want sex, but a lot of them happened after when I didn't actually say something.
Yep. Good day.
So it's like an overriding of something that's happening inside of yourself with relation to men and women dynamics, maybe?
I've got an feeling about it is, you know, like giving out to men and then just throwing myself away and getting angry about it.
Yep. Okay. So you add that to the list.
What if you're a man and you get it all the time?
Yeah.
Correct. You'd have to look at your list, wouldn't you? Like, what is your
What's
list?
happening?
Yep. Certainly. Right. So can you see already we've got a list? And it wasn't that hard to get a list, was it? Like, can you see it wasn't hard? It was like 5 minutes discussion and we got a list. What would you do now?
Investigate.
How do you investigate?
Well, you would look at the options and sit with them and let them percolate.
Okay.
Through.
So you'd feel about the different offers that apply to you. Yep, certainly.
I feel it's very important to go back to the period before it happened and when it was happening and feel what I didn't want to feel then. So really pray about what was happening then that I didn't want to feel, because that's what created the issue.
That's right. Because physical symptom only occurs because an emotional thing wasn't felt. Right? So we know that relationship. So the physical thing's happening, that meant there was an emotion not being felt. So the key is to try to identify the emotions not being felt, isn't it? Yep. Don't blame external things. That's not the same as connecting to an emotion that you're not feeling. You understand?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Every time you blame an external thing, you're trying to take responsibility away for you. Whenever something happens in your body, you created it for a reason. Do you understand?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Whatever that reason is, you created it. You got to find the reason. But by blaming an external thing, you're now not finding a reason. It's your body. You created it for a reason. You understand? So it's very important to understand that. So now we've got some ammo, you could say, to throw at the issue, some ammunition to throw at the issue. So how are we going to find out what it actually was? Says?
Asked to be shown.
Sorry?
Asked to be shown.
So pray to God to be shown. Yes, but let's say you already don't want to feel the emotion.
That's the problem.
Because that's what gave you the symptom. So are you sincere asking God to be shown when you've actually got the actual symptoms which prove that you don't want to be shown?
So do you pray for sincerity?
Why you don't want to know.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Okay, that's it. Or why you don't want to feel. And what is it you don't want to feel? So you have to acknowledge, I don't want to feel something. Not that I want to. I don't want to. And what is it that I don't want to feel? Yep. When issues are raised with you, Anna, you don't want to feel a lot of things. Yep. And this is why you have that in that immediate response of, oh, I'm being attacked now and I need to defend myself, and you know, all those kind of things going on. It's because you don't want to feel a lot of things. And the more a person mentions you don't want to feel that as well, and you don't want to feel that as well, the more you feel like hemmed in, and right. But that's all you fighting the feelings. That's your way of dealing with not having the feelings, not your way of finding the feelings. You understand? So it's very important to understand the physical symptom occurred because I didn't want the feeling. Right? So the feeling was bad enough to create a physical symptom. So praying to be enlightened about what it is I didn't want to feel, when it's quite obvious my body has shown me I didn't want to feel it, would be quite insincere, wouldn't it? It'd be more sincere to say, what is it that I didn't want to feel? Wouldn't it? Not, can I please feel something? But rather, what is it I don't want to feel? Right? What's the thing that I don't want to face?
And I think the thing with something like very acute like that comes on quite suddenly,
and it's quite painful.
It's quite pronounced. Yeah, you can have a. It's quite handy because right preceding that, that's the time period to go back to. It's not like something chronic that's built like a pain in your shoulder, and you can ignore it,
Something that's been there for years.
and then 10 years later you go, oh, what's the cause of my pain in my shoulder? You know, I've got to, you know, obviously there's something I'm acting in all the time that's creating that. But when there's when it's not a chronic condition for you, it's just something that's happened, there's sort of a gold mine just there right before it. Yeah.
Is the urinary tract infection cystitis? Is it the same thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Is it the same?
Well, cystitis is
It's
a
when you-
bladder infection. And the urinary tract is
It's when it reaches your bladder, isn't it?
I think so. Yeah.
Cystitis and thrush are the two.
It's like you want to go to the toilet all the time, but it really hurts.
That's what I call urinary tract infection.
Well, that's cystitis, isn't it?
That's what they told me was the start.
Yeah.
What about being disgusted with your own vagina?
Yes, that you need to put that in the list, certainly, don't you? Yep. Shame, certainly put that in there.
And then I found like thrush and the UTI actually heightened that feeling as well. You feel
Whether you feel
gross
sort of
about
disgusted
yourself.
with your own body. Yeah. So that's an important thing to put in the.
Being angry about your desperate need for the sexual approval or for some approval from the man.
Yep, can put that in the list. Can you see it might not be many of the things you had in the list, but you have to put these things in the list because at the moment you don't know, right? You've got to put them in the list, and then it's a matter of working your way through the list. Which ones do you have an emotional response to? And which ones don't you want to have an emotional response to in particular? Is the real question, isn't it? Because it's the desire to not have the emotional response that caused the physical response. Yeah.
And it will be the same for everyone. Like, you know how you said the left breast cancer is always the same?
Correct.
So it's going to, so even if Anna had a different, like I've gotten thrush after sex, shame, didn't want
to have
was
the
aware,
sex.
didn't want it, but did it anyway, kind of thing, thrush every time. But that, Anne didn't have that experience, but doesn't
Or
mean
didn't
the
she?
emotion, or didn't she? Oh, it's just a,
She wants to tell herself she didn't, but
yeah. Actually, we don't know what happened with Anna.
No, she hasn't felt anything about it. Yep.
Even very
confused.
Right.
well, she's got to go back a few days before the event, and there's something obviously, you know, when she got cold in that time, there's obviously a relationship there, but infections happen over days, not immediately. It's unusual for an infection to happen in a few hours. It normally happens in 48.
I've had it immediately.
Yeah, but it's unusual. Yeah. And so you'd have to at least go back 48 hours, wouldn't you, from the event?
No, I had a discussion with Jesus and it happened because I didn't want to feel
relating to all these things we've been talking about.
Yeah. And then I had immediately the first thing that happened, and as we were still talking about it, was nausea.
Yeah.
And then
which is the coldness and the fear in the stomach a lot of times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is the symptom, one of the symptoms that Anna had.
Yeah. And then when I went home, so maybe within the hour or something, my vagina was actually really sore on the outside physically, but also a UTI started, and then I started feeling some things, and then it went away, but there's still more there. But it was amazing to me how immediate that part of my body physically was so sore, because I didn't want to feel about it.
That's
and I've
right,
been denying it for so long.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so the advantage of talking about the issue with others is that you find all the reasons why it happened for them, or potentially happened for them. Of course, these are all the things that they were aware of
That we're happy
now,
to be aware of now.
but maybe there is a whole heap of things they're not aware of now as well, and they could all be unaware, couldn't they?
Yes.
All of these people could be unaware. You never know, right? But at least it gives you a list. Yep, you got a list. So, what do we pray about? We don't pray about feeling our emotions about it because we obviously don't want to feel our emotions about it. That's why we got the infection. It wouldn't be sincere.
Dangerous thing I don't want to feel, or I didn't want to feel then.
Well, we didn't want to know what we didn't want to feel then. That's the problem.
That's right. That's why we have to pray for that.
So what are the
What
first
don't
thing
I
we've got to
wanna know?
find out? Says,
No, I think I was going to say, ask God to show you the law of attraction. That's asking.
well, you've
something
already
you
got
don't
the
wanna know.
attraction.
That's what we've been detailing.
The physical
is the
thing is the
attractions
attraction.
and the different things that were happening at the time.
Yeah. Sandra?
Could you go like, how does it actually feel to have it?
Yes, of course.
What does it make me feel? That I
Physically,
have
how am I feeling
How
now?
does it feel? Like,
And
Yeah.
also, does it prevent me having more sex? That's something else.
yeah.
So, yay, of course, don't have to.
Maybe, potentially.
Yeah, I got you. What did you say? Get worse.
Does it? What's the effect of the illness? Does it? What does it give me? What's actually?
I can't have sex tonight.
Yeah.
That's even that's.
Okay. So that needs to be added to the list.
Yeah. I physically am prevented.
I'm physically prevented from doing something.
Well, that's what I didn't want to say.
So then the body does it.
Well,
You're like, well, the body's done it.
So,
Would I be doing it if I
question.
didn't have the infection?
What's that, Chloe?
I was going to say, would I still be doing it if I didn't have the infection or had that feeling?
yes, I totally would have. Yeah.
Well, I even had it with the
Yeah, I was
with
gonna
the
say,
infection stuff.
Yeah, I did actually have it with the
And
infection.
it would get more and more
Worse. More inflamed.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask the effect that is experienced. Is that always caused by an emotion that is being denied?
Yep.
And not being felt. So it's not from feeling something
No.
that was out of line or something. It's
No.
not desiring not to feel.
You mean, is it because I'm in an addiction that's unloving?
Well, that's
Yeah,
all
or-
about not feeling
or-
something.
That's about not feeling something.
Yeah. Not feeling something.
So it can be an action that I'm taking
In order to not feel
in
something.
order to not feel something, like having sex.
Isn't it like the sick? You know, what do you get from being sick?
Yeah.
That you talked about last
What's
week.
the rewards?
Yeah. With what are the rewards?
Yeah.
A lot of pain. Yeah.
How does it allow me to control?
Yeah, those
A
kind of
good
questions.
question.
Good questions.
What was that? Rob?
Well, see, a lot of people are not willing to say, I just don't want to have sex with you.
Mm-hmm.
But if they've got a physical infection, they can go, I can't have sex with you.
Yeah, and you don't have to say.
So they don't have to then say, I don't want to have sex with you. Because they know that I don't want to is worse than I can't.
And you can't have a headache forever, can you?
That's right. That's right. So you
According,
see,
I don't know who you've been sleeping with, but a lot of us overrode headaches, UTIs. I appreciate how much gets overridden. How much me saying I have a headache would have worked with my previous part.
Well, John was the one was it? Sex will help that and get rid of it. If you have sex, your headache will go.
Sex fixes everything.
Depends how you're having sex with.
I haven't had that experience.
what a thing to say though, right?
Yeah, it's so
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a list. Can you see, we know we're not sincere about the emotion.
Yeah.
So how do we get sincere about the emotion? Because if we get sincere about the emotion, then the physical symptom will dissipate. So it's quite easy now to measure which emotion, because when I feel the actual emotion, the physical symptom will disappear. I'll be cured. And in fact, for most things, you'll be cured like almost immediately if you feel the emotion. So how what do we do now? The easiest thing to do now is we've got a list of the different emotions we potentially might feel. We've got to feel about each one and go, do I feel that? Do I feel that? Do I feel that? I feel that, have a good cry. Do I feel that? I feel that too, have a good cry. Right? And then if the physical symptom alleviates, we know we hit the right one.
And then you just keep it open because there's going to be some that you don't want to feel.
If you
then
feel
might
all of the
come
things
back
and you
after that.
and you still haven't found it, then you know, oh, I'm pretty blocked to this, right? Because I've still got the physical symptom, which means that obviously none of those things are connecting to me. Of course, many of the things in your list you might not want to connect to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So if you feel the things that you want to kind of feel, you might then get to a point where those other things you will feel that you didn't want to feel originally, and they might
Yeah, and you can also pray to God, can't you, about not wanting to feel. And you can even say, I'm allowed to not want to feel.
State the truth.
I'm allowed to fight this feeling if I want to, and I'm allowed to get cystitis or thrush or whatever the UTI is. If I want to create that, I am allowed to create that. If you want to create cancer and die, you're allowed to do that too.
Because we kind of talked about what is it giving me? And one of the things I thought it gave me was an outlet to hate I was avoiding shame, and it kind of...
You're avoiding anger with the man by hating yourself.
Yeah, by hating. I was avoiding his unloving will by just blaming myself
and your body.
My body, and sort of... And the thrush and the UTI was almost like a hatred of, like, I don't know, it was like a... There's a nuance in there somewhere. Yeah, like a nastiness towards myself a bit.
No, sex is disgusting, isn't it? It's not. I said the vagina, but then I had, like, sex is disgusting because men just want to use women for sex only. That's
yeah, but that's about men, not sex.
I see.
That's about the emotions. I think you need to feel more about that.
Can you see how you blame sex for how men are acting, rather than blaming the men for how the men are acting?
Yes.
But why would you even not want to blame the man and get an infection instead?
Many reasons.
Afraid of getting hammered.
Well, what do most men do when they don't get sex? Anger, what else?
Shaming you.
Shaming you, what
Rigid.
else? Call your names, what
Violence,
else?
potentially.
Violence.
Go
sometimes.
somewhere else to get their sex.
Yeah. Cheat on you. What else?
Manipulation.
Manipulate.
Yeah.
Violence. No, oh, well, that's right.
Forcing themselves on you.
Really hurt you.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, can you see you might prefer to not say anything and instead get an infection?
Yeah.
Right?
If I'm desperate enough that I need and all my desperation for a man to want me, I'm not going to want to say, well, no thanks, I'm not listening to you and you can manipulate me or you can get sex somewhere. I'll be like, I still need you, even if I don't want. I'm going to skip over a lot of things because my addiction is driving the show.
Right. So what did I just teach you?
How to solve our own problems. Go down the rabbit hole.
How to solve your own problems.
What if the problem is sort of a more slowly coming, like I was at the obstetrician and said, I have a beginning cataract in my eye.
Yep.
Is it that emotions that I don't want to see?
Things with the eye are not that slow actually either.
Okay.
Yeah, so generally they are related to something that's happened in the last month or two. Yeah, it's rare for things in the eye to be something that, go on for years. Of course, if it's gone on for years, when it first began, that was the time to look at it, obviously. Yeah. So, but the same thing applies, doesn't it? Exactly the same thing. What is it I don't want to see? What does a cataract do to me?
What's the effect?
What's the effect of the cataract?
What does it give me?
Which eye is it in? You can be an investigator and ask yourself these questions. And of course, the fact that you're getting the physical symptom means that you don't want to know. Mm-hmm. So there is also a need to develop a desire to know, isn't there?
You almost have to start at that premise.
That you don't
Always, yeah. If you've got a physical symptom, you've got to start at the premise that you didn't want to know what the emotion was. That makes sense?
I forgot to ask which eye it was, but if it was on the right eye, it's towards the male or myself. Or
yep, and if it's on the
left eye, is towards the woman.
Yep. But also right and left have spiritual significance in the sense of one of them is about future and the other one's about present and things like that. So
which one is it?
I'm going to investigate.
Investigate.
Yeah.
So I felt compelled to write down some of those things,
Mm-hmm.
but earlier, just before that, I noticed that I was just feeling angry,
About what, Sass?
Well, I'm just angry all the time.
Yep.
And
About what?
everything.
About what?
Yeah, that's
You say everything, but it's very...
Okay.
You see, we want to be indeterminate because we don't really want to know. We want to... When you want to be indeterminate, it's because you don't want to know why, and it's because you want to stay angry. So the reason why I'm saying about what is because if you develop a desire to know about what, then at least you'll be a bit more along in terms of finding out the answers than just going, I'm just angry all the time.
So I'm angry about asking. No, I never say anything. I never ask any questions.
That's not true.
Unless it's about,
you used to.
about if it's personal, if it's about me, if it's going to expose personal truth, I don't ask any questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree with
Yeah,
that.
I agree with
I ask, I'm interested, I can't help myself asking questions about things that I'm really interested in.
Yep.
And that pisses people off. I've noticed it anyway. I feel quite, I'm recognising this desperation that's coming out of me for reassurance.
All the time, yeah.
Yes.
And when it's taken away from you, how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel, it happened yesterday. I feel it's like I don't want to speak in public, I don't want to be exposed, I don't want to...
Yeah, but why? What's going to happen?
Because you're gonna, like, truth is gonna tell me that I'm bad and that I can never, I don't know, it's even worse than what I already believe.
But have I ever told you that you're bad?
No, you haven't.
Isn't it a lot about people's perceptions
Perception of me? Yes.
Because you seem okay with telling me that you're bad.
Yeah.
You tell me that all the time, but I notice that you do have a. Shut up,
Yeah.
man.
If everybody's
sorry.
sorry.
No, I just stopped myself because I think you have to discover it for yourself.
What I'm trying to do, see, many times what you do, all of you do this, is you ask me for the solution to your problems.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't really have a sincere desire to solve your own problems. To develop a sincere desire to solve your own problems requires that you have an investigative attitude with your own problems. Do you follow me? So I'm trying to teach you principles here rather than teach you
To
give answer to Anna about her problem. Right? Like if I give an answer to Anna about her problem, then when she has her next problem, she won't know anything more about how to deal with her problems.
Yeah. And then we'll all ask you about our
Yes, you will be like, oh, I've got arthritis in
Now
my
imagine
pinky
if I've
finger.
got-
I've got a knee pain.
There's 8 billion people on the planet, and there's another 20 or 30 billion earthbound. And imagine if all of them come to me to ask me about their problems. Given the fact that it's just taken me a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to explain to one person how to even solve their problem, how long do you think I'm going to be talking with 8 billion people? So can you see, it's very important that you learn how to solve your own problems. You're not going to learn how to solve your own problems if I tell you the answer to your problems. Right? In fact, in many cases, you're just going to ignore my answers anyway, because you never had an investigative desire in the first place to know what the problem was. You understand?
And that process too is in helping us learn we're capable,
You're capable.
work things out, we don't need anyone else.
It just needs a bit of your time and attention. Is all it needs, isn't it? Not a lot either, sometimes. It needs some time and attention from you, and it needs to be sincere. And if you found yourself confused, what else have we said? What have we done here? Asked each other. Have you ever had a UTI? Yes. Do you know why you had it? What were you feeling before you had it? How were you feeling? Were you in a relationship or you were by yourself? Were you having sex or not having sex? Like, there's all sorts of things you could ask, couldn't there? If somebody's willing to answer, then that adds to your list, doesn't it? All right? So you can involve your friends to a degree, can't you, without being selfish? You can involve your friends and be like, okay, this is the issue, right? And so now that we've armed with the potentials, we also now have things we can pray about that we've identified. We also have things that we can feel about by going through our list. And we know that every physical symptom is a result of an emotion we don't want to feel. It's obviously something we don't want to feel. Does that make sense?
So if you fast tracked it on your list, you probably go for the emotion you don't want to feel the most, is it? That'd probably be the one.
That would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. You won't feel the other ones, probably.
That's right. The one, if you really wanted to get hot on it. But usually the emotion you don't want to feel the most is usually the emotion you're in denial about. The most.
Yeah. So true.
It takes a lot of work.
Well, I mean, I find you can investigate your denial and your methods of avoidance of things. Then, like, then as you notice, and you're like, oh, I'm doing this one again, I'm doing this one again. Obviously, there's an emotion right now. Obviously, there's an emotion right now.
Yeah.
And then over time, I'm still skirting around it, but I've also found that if I stick to myself and go, okay, I'm wanting to avoid, and I don't know what the change was though, but I've dropped into it sometimes going, oh no, this is what I'm trying to avoid. So that's been quite interesting.
Yeah, there's times when our spirit friends, if you're sincere, they can just drop a thought in and you sort of go, oh, haven't thought about it.
Yeah.
Things like that, you know. So Seth, you asked me a question about your personal situation. What do I want to do? I want to not answer it. Because if I answer it, I'll be doing the same as what I would have been doing with Anna, and that is making you dependent on me. Instead, think about the principles we just applied to Anna's problem, and you can do the same with yours. It's just a different problem, but same principles apply. Yeah. So you're in a rage all the time. That's the physical symptom. Does that make sense? Why would you be in a rage all the time? That's the next question, isn't it? Like, it's the same analytical process that we went through. Right? This is the same process that I've done all my life. Yep, with everything. With the discovery of every truth that I've found of God's. Same process. Make sense?
That's the gift, isn't it, really? That you've wiped out 20 billion whatever people asking you. You've just got the structure there and they need to go to it. That's the gift of not telling somebody what.
But it's also the gift of knowing the structure.
Yes.
The structure can be applied to anything.
Yes.
And it can be applied to new truths, not just things you're avoiding. So this is what I'm telling you is actually a message that's in the Paget messages that John wrote, actually. One that we've already gone through, Mary and I have already gone through, it's already online, about truth and how truth is discovered. What I've just went through practically is exactly what he was saying in that message. Do you understand? Yep. It was the stuff I taught him of how to discover the truth for himself. You understand? Yep.
So this is similar to what you're saying with a child who's inquisitive, so you're asking why, and everything you come up with why.
The only reason why we wouldn't want to know why is?
Because we don't want to feel something. Then we lack faith, that's huge.
Which is really we don't want to feel something.
Yeah.
Is that method also applicable in my case with something from women?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly the same. Yep.
I'm thinking the truth thing, just to clarify, because there's some reason that I don't already know the God's truth, isn't there? So that's really what I'm looking for there.
When you say there's some reason, of course, God's an infinite being.
Oh yes,
God has an infinite amount of truths.
Of course.
One of the reasons why you don't know God's truth is because you're not an infinite being.
You've got to take that as my caveat.
And you're going to have to learn something.
That's right. Yes, so because I might get to a point where I don't have any emotional blocks to receiving the truth, but
Which
I still
is
have to
eight sphere, no emotional blocks.
Yeah.
But you still got to learn something.
That's right.
Right? That's right. So don't assume that all of the lack of learning is because, or the lack of knowledge is a mistake or an error, because it is actually a state of a finite being.
only about our own sin, though, isn't it? Like
No.
if it's about our own sin, we can know everything.
Correct, because our own sin are our own creation.
And it's finite.
And it's finite
Yes.
as well. It's not
Thank
infinite.
goodness.
Yes. But when it comes to God's infinite truths, we can't expect to know them all. And we can't really expect to ever know them all.
But we can investigate with a heart that might want to know them all. We just will never necessarily know them all.
Yeah.
But the same thing.
But it is the same principle that we're learning about dealing with our sin that we can also apply to discovery of truth. Isn't it?
Yeah. Can I ask about, like, you know, so when you do the investigation and you start off, so do you have to have a question you're forming, like towards God or towards just about the subject, I suppose? Like what, like, say it was like, what is the, I suppose you'd be doing emotional and spiritual things, but even just anything you wanted to know, like say, why is the flower pink? Just is there always going to be like a question and then like you investigating that through that process we just went through? Is it like going to be, could it be that, or like how?
As you grow, things come to you. Ideas are presented to you. Every new state you get into, new ideas and concepts become, you become inquisitive about these new things. An example of that is if you think about when you were a child and you were 5 years old and you first went to school. And if you weren't afraid, because most of us were, right? But if you weren't afraid, you would, when you're in grade 1, you would be taught certain things, wouldn't you? Yep. Now, if you were taught about love, that would have been the best thing. But unfortunately, we weren't taught about those things. But we were taught about things like A, B, C, D, E, F, you know, like English alphabet for English people. If it's Spanish or Polish, it's the basic fundamentals of that language we're taught. And we're also taught some basic fundamentals about maths, like units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we're taught bases, like base 10, which is, you know, 1 0 is 10, 2 0 is 20, 2 lots of 10, and things like that. We're taught all these things. A lot of times we didn't even know how we were learning them. We were just taught them. Some of them by rote, and other times by illustration, by counting your fingers and toes and things like that. Can you see, when you're 5 and you've yet to learn some fundamental things about even digits, it's impossible for you to learn calculus, isn't it? And in fact, for a 5-year-old doesn't even conceive there's such a thing as calculus. They don't conceive there's such a thing as quadratic equations, right? Either.
I don't conceive.
I think that's the first time I heard it.
You understand? They don't conceive that there's such a thing as algebra. Why don't they conceive it?
There's no pre-learning.
There's no pre-learning that's occurred for them to conceive the new possibilities. So each thing you learn brings you to new things you could possibly learn. The same applies to God's truth. Each thing you learn opens your heart and mind to the possibilities of new things that might be able to be learnt. Once those possibilities are, you become aware of them, now you can question them. Make sense? But you won't question them unless you become aware of them. So why does a child ask why the sky is blue?
Because they can see the colour.
Because they see the colour, and they know the colour is blue. They've learnt that already. They can see the colour, and they go, "Wow, that's funny. Why is it blue? Because isn't space black? So why is the sky blue? If we're looking out in space, surely we should be looking at it black." You know? So they start wondering. They're now wondering new things, and that causes them to ask the question. Do you follow? It's the same principle with everything you will ever learn about yourself, your sin, and also about God's truth. It's the same principle. You will not ask the new thing unless you have a foundation of things upon which to ask. You follow? This is why it's so important for you to begin the investigation into your own sin. Because unless you do it, you will not have a foundation of questions to ask. You follow? You will stay in a state of ignorance. You'll be like a child who's yet to learn 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so he can't conceive there's such a thing as algebra. He can't conceive there's quadratic equations. He can't conceive of these things. Does that make sense? Because he doesn't understand the fundamental principles even of numbers. That even numbers exist to conceive these things. You follow? And it's no flaw on his part, is it? It's just that he hasn't had the basis of awareness yet. And now that he's going to school, he gets the basis of awareness. So you could say the universe is really our school, and God's trying to present a basis for awareness. You follow? And so your question was, how do we get to ask the question? Well, obviously you need a basis, to have a fundamental basis of awareness, don't you? In order to ask questions. But once you have that awareness, it really depends, doesn't it, upon your inquisitiveness as to whether you will ask a question. So some of you, when you were told the sky was blue, you said, right, it's blue. And because of the emotional injuries at the time, you gave no consideration whatsoever to ask why. And some of you, when you're 60, still haven't asked why, and still don't know why it's blue. Does that make sense? You know it is blue, because that's the colour that everyone recognises and labels blue, but you don't know why. Right? Why does the moon look bigger when it's down low compared to when it's up high? It's quite obvious to any person who sees the moon at night that that's true, isn't it? And yet, how many of you asked why?
I just know I love that's the best when it rises. It's like the best feeling in the world.
Sorry?
It's the best feeling in the world when you watch it rise from the horizon.
Yeah, no, it's lovely, isn't it? It's the same when you watch the sunrise and everything. But we don't often ask why, right? And we have a lot of reasons why we don't ask why, but we've got to learn to ask why. Yep. And you need to learn to ask why about your sin. Why do I do this? Why do I do that? Why am I acting this way? Why do I act that way? Right.
It's like I've been saying to people, you know, measure your condition not on what you're telling yourself or what you think. Measure your behaviour, your actions, and that tells you a lot more. It tells me a lot more about where I'm at emotionally than what I like to tell myself. How did I respond in that situation? Who did I prefer talking to? And asking why about those things when I'm stuck really helps me. Whereas you used to just be so stuck in my head of like, oh, I think this about this person, or this is what I'm like really. And a lot of it was just crap I was making up because it felt more comfortable. I really love men, but then I'd be in a situation with a man and I wouldn't be kind. So I could say, oh no, I really love men, it was just that man or whatever. Or I could say, no, in that situation I wasn't kind, so there's something for me to look at here. Yeah. But when I started doing that, it shocked me how little I had been doing that. You know, how much you don't notice your own self. You don't reflect on your own self.
It's funny because yesterday that happened with Jesus when we were eating. I said, can I move your bucket for you? And I just didn't even, I never knew that that's how I ask questions. And I wondered whether it's specifically to do with you or, I started wondering.
Yeah, so maybe if we tell everybody what happened. And I had my bucket in the way of the path, and Sandra comes along with the wheelbarrow and wants to get past, and instead of asking me to move my bucket,
yeah, I said, Jesus, is it okay if I move your bucket? And they both just looked at me and laughed, basically. And I just went into this what
not
the
nastily,
yeah.
But the reason why I laughed is she could just ask me to move my bucket.
He's right there. I would have to drop the barrow, and he's like, you have no
It's easier for
intention
me
of
to move
moving
my
the
bucket than usual.
I know, and I was like wondering, like, am I only doing that with you? Do I do it with everybody? And I had to go and like ask myself, like, and like it hurts because it's like it's so obvious and so ridiculous, and at the same time it's like it's painful to know that I'm doing this, you know, like because it's just so illogical and so. Well, it was stupid. Like
I asked Sandra what she would have said if I said no.
I'm about to dig a little path, weed all the millions around you, and take the barrow around.
And
you probably would have.
I would have. Knowingly, I would have. And then I asked Angela, because I got pretty, like, you know, flustered with it. So I asked the girls, I said, I just did this. Like, what would you guys do? And they're both like, we would do the same thing. I'm like, why? Is it because of Jesus?
Exactly.
Because we're like, you know, like, is it because of you or is it when I do it with anyone else? And today I noticed I asked Jada just normally. So it's not to do with man. Yeah. It's to do with you. Like, it must be because I don't see how. I don't do it with everybody.
Yeah, so there's something going on there, isn't there? Yeah, certainly.
Hasn't she got another awareness after that interaction?
Of course. That's how we get awareness through experience, isn't it? That's how the child gets awareness when it goes to school. It has an experience. It goes, oh, there's numbers. Can you add them?
What do you do with them?
What do you do with them?
What do they mean? My poor maths teacher. Why? What does that? What is the calculus algebra thing actually in real life?
Yeah.
I'd be like, it just is.
I think that's why I lost interest in maths, because I couldn't see the practical application of the A plus B equals C.
Yeah, but most people don't even ask, is there a practical application? You think of how many students at school ask a teacher, is there a practical application for me knowing this?
It's too scary to ask.
A lot of them don't even ask. Well, a lot of them are not interested.
Most teachers don't even know that.
That was the frustration for me, Archie. Is that Mr. Fisher couldn't tell me, and so I projected all of my panic at him all of the year.
Because I've asked, they don't know why, so they're like, don't really know, just so you can pass your exams. You should respond.
Or angry.
Yeah, but
is that what you were actually told, so you can pass your exam?
Yeah, because they don't understand why. But lucky for you, I know the practical application, and I can work it out myself. I don't need like them to.
That's right. Yeah. So every mathematical thing has a reason, and is also useful. Otherwise, God wouldn't have invented maths at all. So there's got to be a use for it. So my feeling has always been, why?
Is that how they do physics? Because I've never done physics.
Yep.
So there's every formula. I wonder how they do this. They go this plus that and an equation and a permutation. And they come out, well, that's the answer. And I'm going, well, how did you get to that? Meaning, I didn't know the meaning of any of these formulas.
Well, all the symbols have a meaning, don't they?
Yeah.
And if you learn the symbols' meanings, then you can learn the meaning of the formula.
It's like a language, isn't it?
That's right. It's like a language in itself. And you know, obviously this is formulas that we've put together on this earth. Might look different in terms of the symbols to another earth, because they might have come up with different symbols, right? But at the end of the day, if you could recognise the patterns, you recognise, oh, that's the same formula, wouldn't you? And there's a lot you can learn from these things. So, you know, most of the devices that you use in the course of a day now are completely generated by formulas. By people understanding the maths and the science behind
How did they come up with that?
how the same way
They asked why.
they asked why. That's how they come up. They're interested enough to ask the questions. That's how you discover any new thing. You've got to be interested enough to ask the questions. The majority of us are not interested enough.
We'd have to ask pretty simple questions, wouldn't we? Because we don't have that.
Well, that's true. The majority of us are so used to just getting everything fed on a platter or whatever that we have come to ask no questions at all, partly. So we have to learn. Yeah. And what a better thing to learn than your own sin. Because, you know, that's what's causing most of our pain and suffering. So that has a practical application in that you get a reduction of pain and suffering if you learn it.
And
So,
you get to discover
so it's even
about
better
yourself.
than learning, say, maths that involved in making a mobile phone, because mobile phone is only going to help you to be able to communicate with somebody and maybe do some sums on it or whatever. But dealing with your sin means you're going to be happy. A mobile phone doesn't make you happy. Yeah. So having an investigative attitude towards your sin is actually going to lead to your happiness, not to misery. And yet the majority of you still act like having an investigative attitude towards your sin is going to bring you misery.
It feels like every time truth is exposed, it feels like there's like, it just grows and grows and grows, and I just feel worse and worse and worse. That's what it feels like for me, you know, like I'm just being more and more evil. That's what it feels like. I know it's not true, but
Yeah, but
in my heart,
even that in itself is an error, is it not? Because why are you attaching your worth to your lack of sin or your sin? Your worth is not dependent upon your sin. So who attached worth to your sin in your history? That's something to investigate, isn't it? Because the reality is God didn't do that. God still believes every human is the pinnacle of his creation. So when you hear a new truth about yourself, you're attaching your worth to your awareness. You're not even attaching it to the reality. Do you understand what I mean by that? Okay. Let's say you believe when you're in a state of denial that you're better than when you're in a state of no denial. So that means you're attaching your worth to denial, which means that you're attaching your worth to a fake reality. Can you see that? So your worth isn't even getting attached to reality. It's getting attached to a fake reality, an imagined state that you want to believe you're in rather than an actual state you're in. You follow? Now, why would you want to do that?
because I just feel like every time I find one, I have to go through a whole self-punishing.
That's not why you want to do that, though.
And because, you know, I don't know why, but that's what I choose.
Well, that's what you choose to do now. As how old are you now? 45?
Yeah.
So as a 45-year-old woman, that's what you choose to do now. But that's not why you chose to do it. Why did you choose to do this? It's an injury.
Yeah.
So why?
Because it felt like if I did that, then maybe the punishment from others would have been so big at times. But also I feel like if I tell the truth, even to God, I feel
None
like
of those
God's
are
gonna
why.
smite me. To avoid feeling. But that's just what you would say. I'm just saying.
It's like, please, Daddy, please, Daddy.
Stop asking me why. Well, we start there. That's true. You don't know why. So what do? We apply this rule that we went through with Anna. This is a big issue, right? Because this is an issue saying every time I receive the truth, I feel like I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear more.
And that, if you think about it, that's the thing I raised very first this afternoon that I feel in a lot of people.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't want to hear it, right? Okay, big issue. Let's identify that as the issue. That's, you could say, the thrush or the
UTI.
UTI, that's the UTI. The infection.
Yeah, it's an
That's the infection that's in me. Okay, so how do I address this infection? What did we do with the other one? The physical one.
To make a list.
We made a list.
What happened beforehand?
We made a list, but what was the list about?
What happened before?
When does this situation occur? How does it make me feel?
What do I get?
What do I get from it?
Avoid.
What do I get to avoid?
Why do I think it's good?
Why do I think it's a great thing? Can you see the same principles that we talked about earlier with Anna about the physical symptoms? This is an emotional symptom, but it's still a symptom, isn't it? It's a thing we do, right? So if we have a progressive attitude towards it, in the sense that we have an investigative attitude towards it, we can find out why Sandra does this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And if we can find out why, and Sandra feels about those things, then Sandra won't do it anymore.
The infection will clear.
The infection will clear,
Yeah.
and she won't be infected with this problem anymore.
Which is really blocking her from receiving lots more truth. Yeah.
Make sense? Yeah. So you feel bad about receiving more truth. So that's the infection. Now we've got to find out why you feel bad when you receive more truth. And then we've got to feel, well, why would you want to do that?
I think first of all, it like challenges this facade that I this belief that I have of who I am, and I think I really am those things because every time I have to challenge it, it's like
Yeah,
no,
but
this
why
is
would
me.
you want to believe that you're really something that you're not?
Because the like reality of me doesn't seem very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, that could be one reason. So you write that down.
I judge something other than what I...
Couldn't it?
I judge the
What's another reason why I would want to believe something about me that is not even real?
Because I don't have to change then. I don't have to
Okay, that's another reason. I don't have to change. I write that down.
And also feeling like because you grow up with that's what people wanted you to be.
Okay, that's what people
good
wanted
thing
me to
have.
be. So I write that down. I got rewarded for being that. I write that down. I got punished when I wasn't that. I write that down. There's a few more things I've written down now, right? What else?
Now there's like a layer of I don't want to feel how terrified I feel about the fact of what actually happened back then.
Okay, so I don't want to remember what happened for me to get into this state where I don't want to hear anything more. So I write that down. All right? Can you see I'm identifying a list of potential suspects of why I feel this way?
Yeah.
You follow? And it's not all just because you want to, is it? There's a whole heap of things going on here, isn't there? And you've got to have an open mind. And if you have an open mind, you get spirit, inspiration. And they'll say, oh, it's also this. And you go, yeah, I'll write that down. Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that either. And write that down. And then you have a chat with some friends about, this is what I do every time. Every time I hear some truth, I just feel like, I don't want to hear any more truth.
Yeah.
Right? So why do I feel that way? Why do you feel that way? No. Oh, write those things down.
We actually did that conversation.
Does that make sense? Write those things down too. Yeah. Like, because some of those I might not have thought of, right? Yeah.
So you say like when you ask that question and I get this physical feeling, like it's in my gut, like I just sit with that then, like that yucky feeling.
Yeah, and what is that feeling? Try and identify it. Oh, I feel ashamed. Write that down.
I feel sick,
I feel like scared, sick, scared. Write that down.
Next?
What's going to happen next? Now that I know, now that this new thing about me that I didn't know is there, how frightened do I feel? Write that down. Can you see what you're doing? You're identifying a list of potential suspects as to why you feel the way you feel. Same principle, right, as before. Yeah. What do I do now?
Keep going.
I've got a list. Yeah. So, what did we say we had to do before? We had to feel which ones.
Oh yeah, and then why you don't want to.
And why you don't want to feel them.
You can also pray, what did I miss? What have I left off?
What are the things I left
What
off?
would be the worst possible thing that I could think of why,
Yeah, go with that.
Just have a feel about that.
Like the worst for me is like I really do believe that God's gonna punish me if I tell the truth. Like if I just said to God, I'm angry about something or anything. Like I literally
Why?
I know why. Like as in what's been taught.
Why would you believe God's going to punish you for telling the truth? Surely God would prefer to punish you for being a liar.
And now I'm saying I was a liar. Or I'm saying to God, I am a liar, and then it's like,
Yeah, but now that's a statement of a fact.
Yeah.
Before, when you were saying, I'm always truthful when you're a liar, that was a statement of you. I'm not a liar is not a statement of a fact. So wouldn't God prefer that you're more honest? Rather than, so why do you believe he's not going to prefer that? So that'd be something I'd note down. what happened in my childhood for me to get to believe that God doesn't want to hear actually the truth about how I feel and instead wants to hear a facade about how I feel? What makes me believe that God is going to find that acceptable? You follow? There must be some reason why I believe that. There's always a reason why you believe what you believe, no matter how wrong it is. There's always some fundamental reason for it. You understand? You got to find the reason. If you're not sincere about finding a reason, you're never going to let it go, right? You're never going to be able to be repentant for it if you don't know what it is. So you got to become aware of what it is. So surely God would prefer you to be aware rather than you to be ignorant. Right?
Because now God can engage with you more if you're aware.
Not only that, if you're unaware of where you're unloving, and now you're becoming aware of where you're unloving, now you have the potential to change being unloving. But if you remain unaware of where you're being unloving, how are you ever going to become loving? Like, God wants you to become aware. So God actually feels it's much better, Sandra, for you to be actually honest and go, I'm actually very angry, I don't like men very much, I pander people all the time, I do this, I do that. God's happier with you, not because you're pulling yourself down, because that God's not happy with that, but God's happy with you going, this is how I am right now. This is the truth about where I'm at. And God doesn't punish you for that. In fact, God rewards you for that. Like the average parent would, and this is another thing we'd have to write down, the average parent would punish me for more things that I recognise are wrong, whereas God will reward me for the more things I recognise that are wrong, that if they are actually wrong. Right?
So this is really the point of conflict then, isn't it?
In what way? Yeah.
Well, in the example of God is happier with me if I'm going, this is where I'm at, whereas my parents were would respond differently. So that's the
So
point.
even on that issue I can go, why do I believe that God's going to act the same way as my mum and dad? Well, that's another rabbit hole, isn't it? To go down that one. There's all sorts of reasons why I might believe that God's going to do the same thing as my parents, isn't there? But again, it's something I have to discover, isn't it? For myself. Like, me discovering it for you, or me even knowing it for you, is not going to benefit you, is it? You need to find this for yourself. When you find it for yourself, you will not only develop the abilities to discover new things about yourself, but you'll also develop more ability of how to solve problems. And you'll also, in the end, feel proud of yourself.
And you have more faith that you can, the next thing that
That's
comes
right.
along.
That you
I
can
don't
solve.
Need, Jesus.
You can solve through understanding the basic principles you've been taught. You can solve any problem.
It also gives you this like kind of freedom because it's more like you are capable yourself and you know the principle to change.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you're not dependent anymore. Yep. So you're not always needing everybody around you to help you with something. Yep. Because you know all you really need is God's help. You got some spirit friends trying to help you, and all you got to do is apply the basic principles of exercising your desire to understand and know. Yep. And if you have a block, as you raised, Sandra, to knowing, then use the principle on that thing first. I don't want to know. That's where I'm starting from. Why? What are my reasons? You know?
And it's so cool when you get to that point, because before then you're in a facade of thinking you want to know, and it's actually it's difficult to interact with because it's like you're asking, but I don't feel like you don't want to know. As soon as you say, I actually don't want to know because it's really stressing me out, and I need to
Yeah,
find out why.
now we're getting real.
Now I can go, oh, okay, here we are. He's sending.
And God loves people getting real.
Yeah.
And we've got all sorts of emotional reasons why we might not want to know something. And they're all valid for us because they happen to us. They're all valid for us, and we need to go through them. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of going, oh, no, terrible because this is how I am or whatever, which is what you have a tendency to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, God doesn't want you to do that. God knows, no, Sandra, you've got to get to the stage of saying, because you have this feeling and there's reasons. And while the reasons are not like good reasons, in the sense that it's not good to be in this state, the reasons are why you're in this state need to be felt and worked through so that you can no longer be in this state. Make sense?
And when you're in that sense of losing place, you just think because you feel like you're just evil, but then I'm always now reminding myself, but God didn't make me that way to start with.
Correct.
That's where it's like such a confrontation, you know? It's almost like I want God to have made me that way. That's the fighting for the error. It's like almost like I want that fight with God, and I want like, no, this is me and you should come to my party, like this, you know?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons for that too. Again, that's another thing we can do our thing about, right? Because when you start discovering all the reasons why, you can see why religions got created. You can see why there's the Christian faith and why there's the Muslim faith, for example. Because a lot of them are about fundamentally believing that God created us sinners, and that God had to provide a rescue for us sin.
And then God has to kind of come to our party and accept us as sinners.
And we have to accept ourselves as permanent sinners, and with only God being able to rescue us, right? None of which is actually true, because we created our own sin, and God is leaving it up to us to get rid of it, because it's our own creation, right? So even finding out why we feel certain things about God and why we feel certain things about truth, and these are fundamental questions that we can apply the same set of principles of discovering the truth about to ourselves. And if we put a sincere effort in, God will reward us for that effort. Do you follow? Yeah. If we continue to ignore, in other words, we have a sincere effort to ignore everything, then of course there will be a reward for the ignorance as well, which will be a lot of pain. Yeah.
Thank you for doing that. That's such a good one.
Is there one of the basic issues, and I guess that's also created by religion and stuff, is no faith that God is good?
No, that God is like this, like literally, like this is what I...
Most religions on earth have been created with that basis. Right from millennia ago, like even before the Christian and Muslim faiths came about, there were most faiths started with the fundamental belief that the gods were punishing us and we had to appease them. And of course, there were a lot of spirits trying to punish people, and they did have to appease them in order to be alleviated from the punishment. And that's how a lot of these... So a lot of the people who made these fundamental beliefs actually had a reason for making them. There were actual spirits claiming themselves as being gods, telling them that they had to do certain things, and who actually physically did things to them, punishing them for when they didn't do those things. So naturally, those people came up with some fundamental beliefs about there being this God that does that, right? So even those people who created those beliefs had their reasons for creating them. And if they'd asked question after question after question, they would have discovered why.
It's so sad because God is like, when you see nature, you just go like, God is so good. And then you just have this other complete feeling, like it's just so like, I feel insane sometimes, because there's these two dichotomies that are so strong inside of me.
Yep. Yeah. But all of that is, again, there are reasons for it, Sandra. And when we're basically saying to ourselves, I'm in a terrible state of sin and there's nothing I can do about it, we're basically also saying there's no reason why I am like I am. Right? So,
causes, it's like I am. It's just like you're convinced of your own.
well, yeah. What happens if there's no reasonable cause? Then you believe you're built like it. You believe you are like that intrinsically. This is one of the compensatory effects of not wanting to hear the truth. Is that you after a while start to believe that you were intrinsically bad, right? And that is a very fundamental flaw of society. Everybody on earth fundamentally believes it. Like, how many people do you say, when you see something go wrong in the world, they say
Human nature.
it's human nature.
And then finally, I'll argue with that angrily, because I've learned divine truth.
Yeah.
But
fundamentally, you believe the same, right? Yeah. Emotionally, you still believe it's your nature, right? And then, of course, when you hear a truth, you then think, "Oh, you're attacking my nature," and I'm not. I'm just attacking your sin. Yeah. And I'm not really attacking it. All I'm doing is exposing it.
Yeah, you're not attacking.
Yeah.
You're just like...
Yeah, but the reality is you need to treat your sin as your enemy, don't you? If you're ever going to grow from your sin, you do need to treat your sin as your enemy, because your sin is your enemy. Yeah, it's different to every other enemy in that it's internal.
And of your own creation as well, rather than someone else.
Not just your own. Not just your own.
So the belief of that God is in you and you are God, is that like saying my law is
Paramount. Yeah, the beauty, you could say the reason why most New Age philosophies have come about is to help you avoid emotion of some kind, one kind or another. If you think about it, almost every religious belief on the planet has been created to help people avoid emotion, right? So you look at Christian faith, created to help people avoid certain types of emotion. The Muslim faith, same. The Hindu faith, same. They're all being created to help you avoid some kind of emotion. Some faiths have even been created to actually tell you that emotion is bad. The Buddhist faith, an example of that, where they talk about desire really being suppressed, right? So every faith on earth has been created for the purpose of suppressing you in some way, right? Obviously, none of it can be God's truth, because God wouldn't want to do that to his children, yeah? If God was good. And so there is a fundamental belief in every belief. There is this fundamental belief that God isn't good if God exists at all.
I'm just thinking now that the religions, or any false belief really, encourages us to believe we're lawmakers in our own right.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if you believe you're a lawmaker in your own right, that then allows you to live in a facade. It allows you to not have to address any of the why am I like this and why am I like that questions. You can ignore all of the things that happened to you in your childhood as to being causes of different things to a large degree. So there's a motive, but the motives are bad for all of these things.
I want to ask you, you said the compensation for not wanting truth is that we believe ourselves to be inherently built with the sin. Is that what you said before? How does that actually work? Like, what's the...
Well, you think about it. If there is no reason why you sin, then it must mean you were built inherently to sin.
So the truth is about the reason you sinned. That's the truth that we're in denial of.
That's right. Now, if you stay in denial of the reason you sin, what else can you blame other than that you're inherently bad?
You've got no choice.
You've got no choice but to accept that as a belief. Have you? If you recognise that, say, murdering is bad, or raping is bad, and some of the other things you do are bad, then, and there's no reason why you do those things, the only thing left is thinking that you're inherently, your nature is. You know, this is how a lot of evolutionary beliefs of survival of the fittest came about.
So the reason is because they're related to the pain we don't want to feel with our parents, let's say, or whatever we've been taught. That's because we don't want to feel the.
You've been taught by your parents to not find out the truth as to why you feel certain ways of things, because most of the truths associated relate to them. So they don't want, and this applies even if you're a parent now, you don't want your children to recognise that actually the main reason why they are like they are is because of what you taught them. You understand? So most parents don't want to recognise that. And so it's better to tell your children that we're all inherently bad, and you're inherently bad.
You're inherently bad. Yes.
And I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Is really what they're saying. Right?
And then we want to believe that to uphold that family.
Well, of course you do, because you're not going to be accepted by your family if you don't. And in fact, if you hadn't accepted that as a child, you might have been murdered, actually. There are many parents have such extreme anger-based emotions whenever they're crossed by their children that you could easily have been harmed physically and violently so, even to the point of getting murdered. But certainly you would have been restricted with your food, you would have been restricted with your shelter. All the fundamental things you need in life would have been restricted by a parent who wants you to believe what they believe. And fundamentally, they want you to believe that you're inherently bad, because that way they can say, don't do that. Why? Because that's bad. Not because of a reason.
It might only be a few things.
It can only be one thing sometimes. You know, like, this is why understanding truth is a lot better, because it gives you it gives you the mechanism to understand why we sin, and that we don't have to. When you believe yourself to be inherently bad, you believe you have to sin.
It also, in my experience, kept me away from a lot of particular fears and
emotions,
grief that I had with particular relationships.
Yeah.
If I just heap it all on myself, I don't have to have any conflict with anyone.
No.
I don't have to face any real
conflict
pain.
with an adult when you're a child
Yeah.
is pretty harsh. So it's natural that you try to avoid it. No, there's good reasons why we sin. Some of the good reasons, when I say good reasons, they're reasonable reasons, in the sense of you can reason on them. You can see, this was what happened. That's the thing I dealt with. This is how I dealt with it now.
There is a reason why.
There is a reason. That's what I mean. They're not necessarily logical reasons, in the sense of from God's perspective logical, and they're not reasonable from God's perspective, but they are reasonable given what happened to us and what we chose to do as a response to them.
And it's not like a mystery, like,
No.
there's no reason why I did that. Yeah.
Life's not as mysterious as everybody makes it out. When I say life, I mean the injured life is not as mysterious as what everybody makes out. Life in itself is mysterious in the sense of the way God's designed things. You're always finding out new things about that, but it's never not pleasurable. It's always pleasurable finding out the new things that God has done. But when it comes to the mystery of our sin, there is really no mystery. Every sin we commit, there's a relationship to something that's happened. Yep. So it's not, unfortunately, sometimes it's quite complex relationship, but not a mystery. The reality is, by every eighth sphere spirit has unravelled all those mysteries, because they're not mysteries. They're actual things that happen. Yep. That's how they arrived at the eighth sphere to a large extent, is by unravelling the sin, unravelling the reason why they sin. Yeah.
Did you ever hear of the sin eaters?
The what?
The sin eaters. I read it in a book. Apparently it's true. In some of the northern European countries, you're chosen as a sin eater. So
a sin
eater.
Eating the sin.
They eat the sin. They take your sin. And when you die, that person takes all those sins from you and they're banished, but they get food and, you know, a livelihood, but they're banished.
Now, when you say it's true,
it's happening.
It's happening.
It happens.
It's true. But, you know,
I get you.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was just
There's
a
been
novel.
many religious concepts historically where, you know, there's been the concept that other people can pay for your sin.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, isn't the whole Christian faith based on that concept?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I
you can
visited
pay.
India, there was just a ceremony that we did, so we got up at 4 o'clock in the morning or something. You went there, you had your tray, your coconut, and all you had to do was bathe the coconut, and all your sin was taken away.
Correct, yeah. So there's a whole heap of New Age concepts. Yeah.
How did you feel great after that?
Yeah, no, I didn't.
The thing I like about God's truth is that everything has a cause, everything has an effect, and everything also is scientifically traceable. Your sin is scientifically traceable. You can trace it back to its cause, and if you get rid of the cause, you'll get rid of the sin. Everything is resolvable. Everything's traceable. There's a link, and you can trace them, and the links are the same with the same sins. And even the same physical effects are linked to the same sins.
I find that interesting though, because everyone's soul and personality is unique, and equally their experience is unique. And yet there are sins that have the same cause and effect. But how that person I'm fascinated by the idea of how that person experiences that sin and its effects. Like obviously the effect is mathematically measurable. Like say with cancer, the rate of the cancer, the exact location of the cancer, like all of those things would be the cause and the effect would be related there. But given how everyone in their sin finds it so hard to relate to each other because they're coming from their own sinful experience, it's really interesting to me how to communicate about causes, because everyone's gonna think that what you're saying isn't the same as them, even though it is the same as them. Do you know what I mean?
Well, the only reason why they think that is because of, you know, like I was saying to Ulf earlier, you know, from childhood when you're brought up as something that is normal, and another person might be brought up with the same thing being abnormal. So of course they're going to disagree in that regard. But the reality is the sin will be identical, and the effect will be identical.
But say, you know, we're talking just for example, the three guys who have a similar sin. It's not exactly the same in its expression.
No person is exactly the same ever, really.
That's what I mean. The sin itself is unique because the person's personality and their experience is unique. It's got a nuance that.
No, I wouldn't say the sin is unique.
Okay, so do you get what I can't get, because I can't get it?
Well, I know what you're trying to say, but when you look at some sins, they are identical.
Yes.
And the reasons for them are identical. But the way the person deals with it is often not identical.
And the way it entered them, is that identical?
Oftentimes, yes, it is. Identical. Yeah, the way it entered them and everything.
But there'll be a unique cocktail of sin within them.
That's different than the individual sin.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, that is true.
Sorry, what was that?
There'll be a unique cocktail, I call it, but like
Mixture.
a unique mixture of different
interacts
sins.
with everything else?
No,
because
not about the specific sin.
It just like, say you and I had, say we had the same injury with our mother.
Let's say you both had cancer in the left breast.
Yeah.
Well, that would be exactly the same sin.
So we've got exactly the same sin. But you and I aren't identical people because we've got a multitude of other sins and our own personality, which
and
means
your own
that
nature. which don't have a bearing on your sin.
Personality, nature, saying, yeah, yep. And then, but when people meet us, they don't go, oh, Angela and Mary are exactly the same, because we've just got one sin in common. Yes, so.
Well, you're not the same even if you've got all sins in common.
Yeah, but that's what I mean, because your personality and nature is different.
Fundamentally different.
And you'll have a unique combination of sins as well, affecting how that personality
But that's only
is.
occurred because of experience. Your unique combination of sin is because you've had a unique combination of experiences. But some of you will have identical sin. So you get cancer in the left breast, you've got the identical sin. You know, you get a tumour in the brain, in the four lobe brain, you've got an identical sin.
Well, you get a UTI, you have to have that.
You got a UTI, you got an identical sin. But the mixture of sin is different for every person. And sometimes unravelling it is a bit more difficult when you've got a certain types of mixture of sins. That's true.
Because you might have to unpack certain layers before you get to that sin, whereas somebody else might not have to unpack those layers.
Correct. Yeah, and the layers you have will be other sins that they didn't have. Make sense? But each actual sin that has an effect has the same effect for the same sin. But every person is a unique cocktail, as Mary said, of sin. You know, and the unique mixture. This is why you can't compare your progress with another person. Because you might have the same sins, but in many respects, but your cocktail of sin will be different.
And is that also fair to say then that, like, progression, like some people might seemingly sort of progress rapidly to a point and then get very stuck, and then other people very slow, and then then they might go really quick because there was one particular thing holding them back. And once they work through that, it might seem so arduous, but then everything else kind of flows.
Correct.
Whereas other people are like,
But also your will has a large bearing.
What we decide to resist and when.
What you decide to resist, when you decide to resist, why you decide to resist. Your decision to resist can often not be the result of sin.
Yes.
Can you say that?
The reasons why you resist are not always because of sin.
What else is it?
Why did Amon and a man resist? Because they made a choice. So your reasons for resisting the truth might not be because of sin. Could be just because you've made a decision to resist.
Based on some perceived benefit?
Oftentimes, but it could be just even things like I'm lazy or
couldn't be bothered.
Couldn't be bothered.
I'd like to try this instead.
Or I find that interesting.
Well, that might be easier, save me some.
You know, when you're a teenager, somebody starts talking to you about you're a boy with hormones raging, and somebody starts talking to you about having sex with two girls at a time, and then you go, oh, that sounds interesting. I might give that a go. Do you know what I mean? And you might not have ever even had a predisposition towards doing it. And eventually the desire becomes fertile, not necessarily because of sin.
It's hard for me to believe that.
Why?
I don't know. Like, it feels to me like there's got to have been something.
So you've got to start there. This is something you've raised with me about 20 times before, Ange. So I would write that down as one of your problems. And start investigating it the same way as we suggested earlier. Because it is something you constantly bring up. You constantly want to suggest that no sinful action
It's my fault.
is ever fully your fault. Yes. That's what you want to believe. And there's a reason for that, obviously, that you want to believe that. But that's not true. There are sins that are just only your fault.
When you have something like cancer of the left breast.
Yep.
That's not a fast law of attraction, is it? It's a slow build-up.
Not necessarily. It depends on the intensity of the denial of the emotion as to how fast it will be. So that is very personal generally. So you both might have cancer in the left breast. You know, 2 women may have cancer in the left breast, and then one dies in 3 months and the other takes 25 years to die. So that will depend upon how much they are in denial of the emotions causing it.
And also it can be something you've been resisting for a long time, or something that just gets triggered and you go, I'm resisting this.
And you resist it intensely.
Yeah.
So example of that is you could have something get triggered, you resist it intensely in the moment, and a week later you're dead.
It's like you with your heart condition, actually. You didn't have a long-standing heart condition, did you? Just something happened, it triggered something else from your past, you really resisted it, and boom. Yeah. Actually, a number of things got triggered at once, but yeah.
And that's often the case.
So when you get something like a very compelling immediate effect like that.
Like I'm dead immediately, yeah. Like an accident where I'm dead immediately.
Yeah.
That's an attraction.
Yeah. So then you tend to feel compelled to go to that thing rather than all those layers and, you know what I'm saying, all the processes that we've just talked about something manifesting.
Yes, you look at the effect only. Yeah. You're compelled to look at the effect and try to address the effect.
Yeah.
But isn't that ignorance of the facts, isn't it? That's a lack of education, isn't it? Emotional education. So that's a lack of faith in, if I deal with the emotion, I'll get rid of this effect. So most of us have a strong tendency to attempt to deal with physical effects with physical solutions. Yeah, thinking that a physical solution will solve the physical effect. Yeah, of course, not true, as is borne out by the results of most people doing that. Yeah, like almost everybody I know who's had cancer who dealt with it physically has died. The fact that they don't want to deal with it emotionally is indicative they're going to die. You understand? Yeah. Yeah, as soon as Lena got cancer, we knew she was going to pass.
How long was her process? Quite a number of years, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yep.
When did Lean's pass? 2021?
Yep.
She found out the precancerous cells in 2014, so 6 or 7 years.
7 years.
But right from the beginning, she was like, I'll
Not going to deal with it.
And I'll never beat it.
Yeah. There was no intention in her to deal with the emotion. Yeah. And she even knew there was no intention in her to deal with the emotion.
What I've been feeling a bit like what Lee said, like, is I'm not going to go there.
Yeah.
There's a line there,
Yeah.
no way. You know?
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, if I'm true to myself, that's the sort of block.
That's the thing you got to get over. Yeah. It's good, Paul, that you, because remember most of our other conversations have been, you know, oh, what about this, and why am I doing this, and why am I doing that, and most of the time when I hear those kind of questions, all I feel is the person's being insincere because they just really don't want to know. They just really don't want to do, you know, and it's a good thing to be honest about it. You're allowed to not want to do. God's given you free will. But it's very important to realise how you use your free will has a large bearing on your happiness.
I'm so angry about it.
Yeah, well, again, for a lot of us, that came from childhood, even why we're so angry about it. You know, most of us in our childhood were taught that there's certain things we're not responsible for, and we don't have to be responsible for them. You know, and you know, it's a very common belief because our mothers or our fathers generally inculcated us with that belief when we were very young. You know, that we shouldn't have to be responsible for things. They never took responsibility for their stuff, and they taught us that we should never have to be responsible for ours. And many people are angry with God because of that issue, because God is making us responsible. Yeah. You know, a lot of religious beliefs were created out of the anger that God makes you responsible, and they want to ignore the fact. You know, the whole Christian belief is all about that. Let's all ignore the fact that God makes us personally responsible, and let's put the responsibility on Jesus instead. You know, that is the direct result of our childhood training, that we shouldn't have to be responsible for certain things. Yeah. But it is an anger we need to work our way through and get to the bottom of, you know. We should have to be responsible if you think about it. If we have free will, by definition, we should be responsible for how we use it.
But because it's anger in such error, it seems pointless to express that and to run with that. It seems like it's pretty whinging about that. When the beauty of whinging about it, if you want to put it that way, is that you are constantly conscious that that's how you feel. If you don't whinge about it, you have a tendency to be in denial. So that's one layer of extra denying extra, isn't it? So at least when you're whinging all the time and everyone says, oh, Paul, he's a real whinger about that, at least you're aware that you're whinging about it and that's what you're angry about. Well, I do want to forget about it every second day. So
Yeah, of course. Yeah, when you come here, you don't forget about it, and that's good. And the key now is to go beyond that anger, as I was saying to Ange earlier, and try to discover, okay, what is this anger? What power? What emotions is this anger giving me power over? What be the investigator again. Why am I wanting to stay in a state of anger when I know that it's so stupid?
Do I know it's stupid? That's something I've had to look at. Like,
well, you don't know it's stupid. You intellectually know it's stupid.
Why? Also looking at, well, I want to say this is a good protective anger.
Yeah.
But if I look at my life, how's that going for me? You know, those kinds of questions.
How's it all working out? Yeah. And you've got to be honest about these things. And as you are, the more honest you become, the less angry you become. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the anger is there to help you avoid deeper emotions, isn't it? Yeah. But it's a much better state, Paul, to admit to yourself, even every second day, that you are angry and you don't want to do it, than it is to say to yourself every day you do want to do it when you don't. You know, God's happier with this state, you could say, than He was happier with your previous state.
And I find that with a lot of stuff, with myself, like demand on women and that. That I feel, well, there's no point being angry about that. I am angry about it, but there's no point in expressing it.
Yeah.
Because it's just pretty stupid. But what you're saying is that be in truth with it, and if I have to whinge about it, I'm more likely to own that.
Well, you're more likely to get underneath why you want to stay angry rather than cry about an issue. Yeah. And the reality is you've got free will. You're allowed to stay angry for as long as you want. Of course, it's not going to be very pleasant, but you are allowed to do that. You know, God's given you the ability to make that decision if that's what you want to do. It's not going to be very good for your health or for your life, but oftentimes we got to realise that before we go, oh, I'm just staying enraged is also just crazy, really, in the end. I'm better softening to what's underneath the rage, which I'm using the rage to protect. Yeah. So, if God's happy with us, the more truthful we are. I know that it's not always easy to be more truthful, and that's one reason why God's happier with us. often it's not easier, mostly because of our environment. It's much easier on yourself individually, but you know, often when you're truthful, your environment responds badly. Yeah. Well, when I say your environment responds badly, I'm talking specifically about the earth environment. Because obviously the celestial environment responds very well to you being more truthful. And the spirit world always responds to you very well to you being more truthful. So.
But also, as you were talking about some time ago with the atmosphere we create, the more truthful we are, the better atmosphere we will create. So eventually, the people who like are angry at us or don't like us because we're being truthful will be out of our lives.
That's right. They don't want to be there. Yeah. You know, they might bitch about you behind your back, but they're sick of trying to do it to your face. Yeah. Which is a good thing, isn't it? Yeah.
One of the things that I've had to look at though is that often I've loved truth, but I haven't wanted to be truthful because I still wanted the atmosphere with the people who didn't love truth. Because I thought without them I'd have no one, you know. Yeah. So I had this inner battle between truth and like just shutting everything down because I wanted the untruthful people, the people who didn't love truth. It's very harmful.
Well, you want something from them.
Yeah, I want their company. I want their approval.
But even their approval isn't approval.
It's not approval for me.
And their company isn't good company.
They're just approving of me shutting down truth. And there's a lot of pain in that. Yeah.
But also in that case, like I'd say that I'm in a similar situation as you describe, and it's that I don't believe that if I do say the truth, in the end it's going to work out better.
It's a faith issue, isn't it? Yeah.
And that I will be lonely if I do, because I don't believe that there will be people who want to be my friends after that.
Something I learnt from Jesus, Archie, is that if we grieve being lonely, we're a bit okay being alone. It's like we think loneliness is the worst thing in the world.
It's not.
And it's just a sadness, and if we let it go, I haven't done it yet, so I'm quite afraid of that sadness, but that I see that in Jesus, like he can feel sad sometimes about things, but aloneness doesn't bother him in the way that bothers most people, because he's grieved loneliness.
Yeah.
Most of us fear it, I think, very strongly.
I think because we've attached our worth to loneliness again.
To others liking us, or
Well, yeah, just the fact that you have friends means you're worth something. You know? And when you have no friends, it means you're worth nothing. And I went through that emotion, you know, where I felt like I was worth nothing because I had no friends. And then when I come out of that, I felt like, no, I'm worth something, and I don't need friends to tell me that.
It's like a superpower. Like you've got a coat of worth.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, you know, as you know, I've got to do with some more worth issues, but what I've learnt is that a lot of progress is about disconnecting your worth from things. It's like, so for many of you, your facade is your worth. So if you disconnect your facade from your worth, you go, actually, my facade's real bad for me. Get rid of that. And then you got, your friends are your worth. So you find that actually once you deal with feelings about that, you go, no, my friends don't define my worth. In fact, quite often they're pulling me down or even attacking me, people who are being my friends. So they often don't help my worth at all. And then you go, oh, being belonging to a family is worth. But actually, is that true? Not really. You know, because that means a person who's an orphan is not capable of worth, and that's not true.
You could make a pretty long list there, eh?
Yeah. So you know, we've got all these things that we've attached to our worth. One of which is being alone or having friends.
But then that's also why we so badly want it, because it's like we are deconstructing our worth by not having it.
Correct. So if you're prepared to face the emotions associated with your worth, you can deal with pretty much anything. Yeah.
shows that humanity is the real superpower of the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been feeling a little triggered about friends, not having many,
Yeah.
and trying to challenge, like feeling like I want to challenge that a bit, but also feeling like at the moment it's going to be like all about addictions because I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah, true friends are people who really have the same goals and desires as you, aren't they?
Mm.
And on earth, it is hard to find people who have same goals and desires sincerely because there's so much addiction.
Mm.
So, I don't know, trying to have friends is, what I've found is that you've got to give up the trying to have friends. Because trying to have friends, usually what you start doing is you're making compromises. Rather than just identifying the people who have similar goals and desires and you know, working with them. If you do anything else other than that, then most of the time it's not real anyway. I have a lot of good friends, but not here on earth. Yeah.
It's the same for all of us.
Sorry?
It's the same for all of us, yes.
No, not necessarily.
We haven't cultivated them, but we could.
Yeah, but many people on earth in their first incarnation don't really have many friends in the spirit world either. They have people who care about them, but they wouldn't recognise them as their friends. Yeah.
It's something you were talking to Kate about, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because she was saying that she wanted to maintain friendships that she'd made on Earth.
On Earth, yeah. We have occasional chats with Kate, and you know, every person who passes has these injuries that start coming up, you know, and she's living in the second sphere, but she's still finding at times that she'd rather her friends on Earth than making new friends there, you know. And also that because of grief, friends on Earth are ignoring her.
Because of grief.
Yeah, people on Earth don't want to grieve the loss of somebody. So
they don't have a connection then.
Well, what happens internally is you're suppressing your grief. And so you don't really want to be reminded of the person, because every time you're reminded of the person, you feel your grief. So, and you're suppressing your grief, so you don't want. So basically, the net result is you don't end up having the relationship continue, because you're suppressing your grief about the person.
And that happens on Earth too, doesn't it?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah.
Fathers and their children.
Yeah. People suppress their grief a lot and then don't finish up having a relationship. I remember one guy I knew, he was a very intelligent fellow, he was an accountant. He when I broke up from my ex-wife, he said, you're better off having nothing to do with your children. And he said he tried it for nearly 6 years to have something to do with his children. And in the end, his wife just poisoned his children about him. And he found it so distressing that he almost killed himself. Wow. So he said in the end, you're better off not having anything to do with them. That was his advice. Avoiding grief. But that's what we do with our spirit friends, people who pass. Avoid the grief, and we don't end up having much to do with them as a result. The reality is they can have more to do with us than they probably had when they were on Earth, if we allow them. But for most of us, we don't allow it.
Yeah, like we saw Kate how many times a week? You know, each of us different amounts. And then do we have that same amount of time with her now? When it could be more. Yeah.
There's often times when she's around some of you, but you don't respond because grief prevents you, or a lack of belief in the spirit world prevents you, or a lack of belief, a lack of ability to determine what you're thinking of versus what the other person's thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, either it brings up a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
Or I just doubt whatever.
That's right. Doubt has a doubt causes people to have very complex emotions. Yeah. Doubt is a very insidious, damaging state. Actually, it's far better to feel emotion than it is to doubt. Yeah. 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 But in the end, you end up in a state where, you know, The reality is, almost every discussion we have now, Kate still attends. You know, but most of you don't feel she's here. But this is what I mean by friends, you know, like sometimes we have friends and we don't even know we have friends. And then other times we think we have friends, but they have no common interests or goals or common feelings or anything with us at all. Oftentimes the people we choose. So
Jesus, about doubt. Is it better to be wrong than to have doubt?
probably. Doubt causes inaction. Yeah.
That's why
Wrong, you'll choose to do something and then you'll realise from the result that it was wrong. If you doubt, you'll choose to do often nothing. And then you'll never realise what was right. Yeah. Doubt's a very insidious emotion, driven by fear, of course, but often a preferred state of humanity. Yeah.
And I find spirits, well, this is what I think, you know, just because I can be on a track that I think, oh yeah, this is right, and then I get some anger, sort of blaming, sort of all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Wow,
Spirits know the best way to get control of a person is put him in a state of doubt.
Yeah, that's what I feel.
Because you're detuned from your will.
Okay, yeah.
When you're detuned from your will, that's when spirits have more control. So you're far better off having a strong will and measuring the results of that will than you are just being, you know, doubting all the time and being influenced one way or the other. Yeah.
At night time, it's been giving me a hard time.
Yeah. It's a good verse in the Bible in the book of James about that. It says, he who doubts is like a ship being driven by the wind without a rudder. And that's exactly what you do. Spiritually, you're driven by whatever blows at you at the time. Yeah. You know, somebody puts a bit of pressure here and you go in the other direction. And somebody puts a bit of pressure there and you go in that direction.
Yeah. And from lack of firmness within myself.
Yeah.
True desire to have a direction.
Yeah. And we do it for lots of reasons, but mostly to avoid emotion. And to avoid responsibility.
Responsibility, that's right.
Yeah. It's a big thing for people, particularly here in the Western society. Big thing. Avoiding responsibility. Man, how many times do you hear somebody speeding, they got caught, and what do they say? Or, you know, you get caught doing something, what do you say?
Not my fault.
No, it's never my fault. It's very rare that somebody says, oh, that was my fault. I did that. Do you know what I mean?
That's why police don't really know what to do when you do it.
That's right.
Like, you know, like we've had people in the group who've confessed to major crimes, and the police are like, oh, okay then.
Okay.
You go in front of a judge, they're like, well, you're reformed, okay. Go home. That literally has happened.
Yeah, but then, like, my dad, he manipulates that by confessing.
He does,
and he knows
actually.
he can get away with it.
He kind of does it as a disarming tactic. It's not a sincere feeling of wrong. Yeah, I've heard him tell stories about that. Quite proudly.
Okay, guys. Thanks for your work today.
Thank you, everyone, for everything today.